Hey again, everybody. Welcome to the Retro Monster Truck Review. My name is Josh Rhodes. Today we've got Phil Vicinanza on the show. He's going to talk to me about Monster Jam World Finals 9. Wanted to thank you guys real fast, though, before we begin for all of the Apple iTunes 5-star ratings, as well as all the follows on Spotify. It really means a lot to me. But please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, as well as comment on the YouTube channel. We're up to 44 subscribers. We need to get some more up there, boys. I really want this thing to grow as much as possible, and I appreciate all the help that I can possibly get. Without further ado, though, let's get to talking about Monster Jam World Finals 9 here on the Retro Monster Truck Review. Hey everybody, this is another episode of the Retro Monster Truck Review. Today we've got Mr. Phil, and Phil, you're going to have to say your last name because I can never pronounce it right.
Yes, my name is Phil Vicinanza, and I'm proud
Yep.
of my last name.
Yeah, I should be proud of it. I can't pronounce it. Nobody else can either. No, I'm just kidding. But Phil runs the Monster Truck Collecting Group on Facebook, and he's also, just like me, a former competition manager with Monster Jam. And I wanted to get on here and talk about one of my personal favorite World Finals events, and that's number 9, which produced some of the best racing I think we ever really saw out at Las Vegas. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. World Finals 9 was my first World Finals I attended, and still to this day, even after being involved of the last couple, from a production standpoint, still my favorite World Finals 9, and the racing is, tip-top shape.
Yeah, this was going to be my first and maybe only World Finals that I was going to go to, but as it got closer to time, I could never find the time to actually book the trip. And when I started to book it, the flights and everything, the hotel was almost $6,000 before everything was all said and done. So I ended up not being able to go to it. The saddest day in my life was selling that ticket. I was like, God, I wanted to go to that one so bad. And of course, it's the year where they have all these close races and these really good freestyles and everything. But anyway, just to give a little bit of note here, on our broadcast team, we've got Scott Douglas as the lead and Mark Schrader as the color commentator, and we've got Shara in the pits. We don't have a last name for Shara. I just put her name in parentheses right there as kind of the pit reporter. A little bit of a backstory, though, on Sam Boyd Stadium itself. The stadium was the home of the UNLV Rebels football team from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, from 71 to 2019, a long-time stop on the AMA Supercross schedule from 1990. It was always the final race up until, I believe, was it 2019?
Yeah, so the last, for Supercross or for Monster Jam?
For Supercross.
Supercross, I think they did the Monster Energy Cup there in October of 2019, and then that would have been the last dirt bike event.
Okay. And then from 2010 to 2019, we have the USA Stevens leg of annual World Rugby Sevens series. I can't even pronounce this right, but I just thought it was funny to throw a rugby stat in here for Vegas. Several professional football teams called this place home as well. The Las Vegas Quicksilvers, North American Soccer League, the Las Vegas Posse, Canadian Football League, and probably the most famous, the Las Vegas Outlaws of the XFL played here. Did you ever have any experience watching the XFL back in the day? Because that's still one of the most talked about series back in the day.
Surprisingly, no. Obviously, we're very familiar with it now. We're both wrestling dorks, so
yeah, exactly.
We know the vein of XFL, and when XFL came back and left and came back again and everything. So, no, I'm a diehard New York Giants fan. I never strayed to any other offshoot, so I'm sure I wasn't alone on that too.
Now, get into some of the World Final stats here. You're a stats guy. I'm a stats guy. World Finals 6 was the last event World Finals 5 was the last event that they had 16 trucks competing at the Monster Jam World Finals. We go to World Finals 6, they up it to 20. Then from World Finals 7 to World Finals 13, we had 24 competing trucks in racing. World Finals 14 had 28. World Finals 15 through 19 had 32. And then the previous World Finals 20, was back down to 24 again. It's like a musical chairs game here as far as how many trucks are actually going to be competing for the World Racing Championship and the World Freestyle Championship. What do you think is the perfect number?
Oh, man. So I guess from a business standpoint or the value for my dollar, I would want as much as possible. So when it maxed out at 32, that's incredible because I mean, first that's double from where we started. Just crazy to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it from like an even bracket standpoint. It makes it a little bit more smoother when it comes to buys or even not even at that point because it's still 32-16 and then down from there. So I think 32 is a good number just for being selfish because more is more. But I'm sure maybe some more purists will stick to 24, and that was the longest standing number and seemed to have worked. There wasn't really issues when it was 24, like where it was so glaring with. I think even with 32 trucks, there were still trucks that probably should have been in the event that couldn't make it.
Yeah, I agree. Even with, like you said, 32 trucks, there are so many good monster trucks out there. The narrowing it down to the great, though, is what you get for the World Finals generally every year. For me, I was skeptical when it went to 24 trucks, but I still think that's my favorite number because I always like the aspect of okay, the top 8 trucks are already into round 2. So then you got guys racing in round 1, and then you've got these untested guys racing in round 2. I always like the dynamic of that. I thought it was interesting. The 32 trucks is interesting as well because you've got guys racing all the way through round 1. It's the longest round 1 probably ever in monster truck history with 32 trucks going at it. But still, it's an interesting thing to actually watch, and I enjoy it. It's more of the NHRA style bracket guy in me when I go back and I look at the 32 trucks. Field of trucks here, though, and this is a big one here for 24 trucks. There are some big names in this one and some big changes that went on in the offseason before this even happened in first quarter of this year. But first up, we got Damon Bradshaw on the Air Force Afterburner, Rookie of the Year, I believe, the year before for Monster Jam. We got Jim Kohler, a perennial World Finals veteran. Batman and John Seasock looking for his second racing championship. Black Stallion, Mike Vauders. Blue Thunder, Lindsey Wink. Bounty Hunter and Jimmy Cretin. Captain's Curse with Alex Blackwell behind the wheel. This is an interesting one, Phil, because this was generally supposed to be Pablo Huffaker.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Pablo. He won the freestyle championship the year before, debuting Captain's Curse in the World Finals. But everything spins a little differently on Planet Monster Jam, and Pablo was not even at the World Finals present that year. Alex Blackwell was the main driver of Captain's Curse for 2008, and he gets the call here for his first World Finals.
Yeah, his first World Finals, and it's a memorable World Finals for Alex as well. Has a very solid event. Destroyer, Dan Evans. This is a new Patrick chassis Destroyer. We're used to seeing the old Dan Evans coming down Thunder Alley with the tires just doing this down the straightaway. But we go from Dan Evans down to Donkey Kong and Frank Krimmel, another veteran. Lupe Sosa and El Toro Loco. Escalade with George Ballhand. Still, to me, one of the most interesting trucks out there just for how plain it was. But it really had a lot of a following to it. I mean, George really lived this, I guess you could call it a gimmick with this truck.
Yeah, no, it ties right into where eventually its successor is Mohawk Warrior. Mohawk Warrior is obviously still running today, with Great Clips and Bryce Kenny, but that is very much just George Bellhand's personality because he called his fans the Mohawk Nation. They're all Mohawk Warriors. So
I think his face is still on the side of the truck. It's actually still George's face on the side of the truck.
It's George's face on the side of what's now the Great Clips Mohawk Warrior. So it's still very impactful.
Oh yeah. Speaking of impactful, Gravedigger, Dennis Anderson, multiple-time world champion in the field here. Iron Outlaw, and get this, Craig Christensen behind the wheel. This is an interesting time for 2 Extreme Racing. We'll get into that a little bit later. King Crunch, David Smith, one of the most legendary names in monster trucks. Maximum Destruction, Tom Mintz, 7-time Monster Jam World Finals champion. Monster Mutt and Charlie Pauken, Monster Mutt Dalmatian and Chad Tingler. Pastrana 199 with Cam McQueen behind the wheel. This, I believe, is his first World Finals. Friend of Travis Pastrana, and he's also got on what I thought was funny, a Red Bull driving suit throughout this whole weekend.
Yeah, it was pretty weird. Cam McQueen was a late, entry into the 2008 season. Obviously, Courtney Jolly started the year and she got injured. Cam McQueen probably wasn't driving for 30 days at this point. Hence why he didn't even have like official fire suit. And
I think he only had 10 shows under his belt. I think they mentioned that in the qualifying. He only had 10 shows.
yeah, and that was probably a lot of arenas. So this is such a culture shock, and now you're competing for a world championship.
Like, hey kid, here you go. Here's the big. It's like a rookie that's never ran in the Xfinity Series going to the Daytona 500. Here you go, kid.
Yeah.
Let's see. After Cam McQueen, Safe Auto Minimizer, another, I believe. No, actually, he's not a Vegas rookie. He's ran in a couple of World Finals, I think, at this point. It's Mark Mcdonald, Scarlet Bandit with Don Cretin, another Vegas veteran. Stone Crusher, Steve Sims, Chad Fortune, and Superman. Team Suzuki with Bobby Parr, and a brand new truck competing at the World Finals for Adam Anderson and Taz. Sam Boyd Stadium. This has now been 19 years as the home of the World Finals. The racing here became iconic for this very unique track style that we had. The trucks would start at an angle out back in the concrete parking lot, which they would eventually change from concrete. They would lay some dirt down. But I was always a fan of the concrete start because you'd really see the wheel spin before they would get out there onto the dirt. And then that long straightaway known as Thunder Alley, where there's still some speed records that were held out there. I think Mintz went about 70 miles per hour out there at one point, which is insane to think of, that they would almost have to virtually stop to make a complete right-hand or left-hand turn and then head straight back down to a set of cars. It's an astonishing racing track. It's always been one of my favorites. And let's get right into it. We'll go into qualifying. When we open qualifying here, Phil, we open with one of the most unique voices in monster trucks, of course, Scott Douglas.
I love Scott Douglas.
Who the heck doesn't? I love that guy. He is one of the most fun guys I've ever got to sit down and talk with. Just a wealth of knowledge in that man for this sport, for this industry, for any really racing automotive event out there. Scott Douglas probably has a little bit of knowledge with it. And he is a perfect pick to be behind the microphone here. The qualifying procedure here is very interesting to me. A fan picked a number for each driver to determine the qualifying order. One practice per lane. The third pass will be your official qualifying run. And this is expanded a little bit later by Scott Douglas saying that their first practice lane will be the lane that they qualify in, which I thought was kind of weird. I don't know why they wouldn't give the drivers a choice. Hey, you know what? Which lane would you prefer to qualify in, kind of thing? But they didn't do that. Bodies and hoods obviously off most of the trucks to prevent damage. Seated depending on the times. So the 8 fastest trucks will automatically advance into round number 2. And then the fastest qualifier wins the big double down trophy, which I always liked the double down trophy. I thought it was a cool, unique thing that they did for qualifying.
Yeah, and they made it, the trophy was always like so obnoxious and like over the top compared to even just like the regular physical trophies for the actual world champion. It's just like, yeah, I won this practice night that not too many people got to see. Look at this massive trophy I get to take home.
Yeah, I never understood why it was so big. I understand a plaque would have been cool. Like, hey, cool, I won this plaque. No, Tom, the trophy's almost as tall as Tom. It's huge.
Tall, if for some reason you've never met Tom Mance.
Oh, yeah, and Tom's pretty tall. Let's see. Here's just a few quick little notes here. First World Finals for the brand new Destroyer truck. Craig Christensen, a Las Vegas rookie, even though he's not really a rookie. He's been around for quite some time driving the Dragon Slayer truck. I think he drove a truck called Max D at 1.2, but anyway, we'll get to that. Second year in the World Finals for Team Suzuki and Bobby Parr. He only raced the year before. He raced it, Criminal freestyled it. Lindsey Wink, noted to have some big TV wins. He's making his World Finals debut in Blue Thunder. Adam Anderson and Taz with a brand new truck testing out a new suspension. Coil over shocks. Could you believe that? Coil over shocks on a monster truck? No, I'm just kidding. Damon Bradshaw, 2007 Rookie of the Year, second year in Vegas. And this is also Cam McQueen's first World Finals, as we touched on earlier. Last year's freestyle champion has a new driver behind the wheel. Alex Blackwell has long been debated over why Alex got this ride and Pablo Huffaker didn't. Pablo really never got to defend his world championship freestyle until the very next year when he was behind, I believe, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle truck. The story I've heard over the years, and don't quote me on it, is just a rumor, is that Pablo won the championship and he no longer wanted to be a Gravedigger driver. He wanted to drive Captain's Curse. Just to debate on this, Phil, what do you think the timeline would have been like had Pablo got his wish?
Oh, well, that's so harsh because, yeah, you win a world championship, but I mean, Pablo at that point had been driving Gravedigger for over 15 years, approaching 20. So it would be such a culture shock where all of a sudden now there's one less Gravedigger on tour. So then you have to find another Gravedigger driver, which who even is that? And the agreements that they had with Pablo to run, Gravedigger or whatever, the second truck would be, it was just very unique that just some requests like that would just really have a bigger domino effect than usual driver changes.
Yeah, very true. Honestly, if Pablo would have left the Gravedigger team, you would have seen fans like myself, just their jaws would have dropped. And I think that's kind of maybe where the powers that be were kind of like, you know what, Pablo, if you leave this truck, and it's been often said over the years, Pablo, you're the West Coast Gravedigger. And he truly was. He campaigned that truck over there on the West Coast. Dennis was always on the East Coast running it. But when Dennis came over there, it was always a shock because people got to see a different driver behind the wheel and may not necessarily have even known that it was Dennis Anderson.
Yeah.
But anyway, we scoot on here. Tom Mintz, seven-time world champion. John Cisak, defending racing champion. Just some stories here going into qualifying. Dennis, former World Finals freestyle champion in 2000, a World Finals racing champion in 2004, 2006, and 2010. Mintz, titles all over the board for this guy, and it really appears to be, after you watch qualifying here, that this is Mintz's weekend to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's Tom is such in his prime here too. I mean, it's kind of weird how Tom's career
I think Tom's prime spanned from 2000 to 2018. The man is just
even now. It's like the time of recording this is 2021, and he started off that Stadium Championship Series in the points lead. So it's very weird, and this is a time period where he's not too far removed from his previous world title, but you still look at the number 7, and you realize the first 5 were very much lumped into the beginning, and now it's not as dominant as it once was. Maybe because we're expanding the field and the competition's getting a lot tighter in Monster Jam.
Yeah, it's getting a lot tighter, and his truck's getting a lot older. This is still, I believe, the Goldberg truck that debuted in 2000 in Atlanta. A lot of new technology being built, and speaking of new technology, that's probably why Dennis Anderson's winning so many racing championships. He's got Gravedigger number 20 right here. This is the 20th Gravedigger in the fleet, and arguably the most dominant Gravedigger ever built.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I said, I wasn't a chassis guy, but I know Gravedigger 20, that any TV event Dennis pulled to the line there, you'd be hard pressed to not see him win an event.
Yeah, it was always, if you went to an event and you saw that Dennis Anderson was in the lineup and he was driving Digger 20, it was almost like Richard Petty back in the day. All right, who's getting second?
Yeah. Yep.
When he got that truck dialed in, he was very, very, very hard to beat. I remember, I think there was one racing season where I think he only lost twice. I can't remember the exact year off the top of my head, but that truck was just good. Anyway, though, we go on to some qualifying passes here that are shown. They don't show any of the practice, which I find weird. You're not going to show any of the practice, but you're going to mention that it was there for the qualifying show. Iron Outlaw noted to have the fastest pass in round 2 of practice, but the qualifying time here, worst of his 3 passes, a 17.29, 9/10 slower than his previous pass due to a really wide turn for Craig here. And when you watch it, I mean, he swings out really wide, and you can just tell it's frustrating. He's frustrated behind the wheel when he's going across the line.
Yeah, and obviously we'll talk about it. Not a good weekend for Craig at all, and it's just very, very interesting when he got in that Iron Outlaw truck. It was a very interesting 2008, and I think when you see that too, definitely qualified in the wrong lane. I think that's very obvious.
Yeah.
Maybe the nerves got to him. It doesn't matter how much of a veteran you are. I mean, you're at the World Finals. It can get the best of you.
Yeah, and I mean at this point too, the track has obviously changed since his second pass, even since his first pass out there. I don't. This is where it kind of comes in, where you're like, why couldn't he got to choose which lane he really wanted to qualify in? It almost makes the practice pass in the other lane completely irrelevant.
Yeah, it's almost just like content for the double down fans that were just anybody that was there. It was just very, very moot. I understand from like a production perspective, got to have 2 guys all lined up or gals on the line at the same time. But it's why even offer that, knowing that you might not even race in that lane the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Team Suzuki power slides the rear end here through the first part of the turn, and it doesn't get the rear steering quick enough, and to capitalize on that great entry that it had, pushes wide 17.59. Nothing really to talk about there. Bobby Parr's second, I think actually maybe his 3rd or 4th pass ever at this track. it doesn't really show behind the wheel for Team Suzuki. Escalade, George Bellhand is conservative into Thunder Alley, goes into the corner, also very conservative, makes a tight corner, but the rear tires wash out just a bit. He can't quite get to the throttle, has a little bit of a tire spin. He does set quick time, but not by much at this point with a 17.25. George claims to have made the pass with no oil pressure.
Well, that's what happens in Vegas.
Yeah, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, just like his oil. But anyway, thanks to Mikey Vaughters, excuse me, thanks to Mike Vaughters, I said Mikey Vaughters, for helping George with his mohawk during this interview. I thought it was funny. Mike Vaughters comes up there and just kind of helps George straighten his mohawk just a little bit in the middle of his interview. Nice little touch. A surprise to me, number 4 out is Gravedigger with Dennis Anderson. And at this point, Dennis has been probably the most dominant driver in Vegas. 2004, 2006 world champion up to this point. Dennis comes out, a lot of wheel spin on the start. You can hear Dennis waiting on the throttle. It's like he's waiting forever to get into the Thunder Alley right here. He's grazing the throttle. I'll put it that way. He's grazing the throttle until he finally gets on it. You're like, man, when he gets on it, the truck moves. It's obvious. Digger 20 is going to move down the straightaway. Gets to the corner, does not have a good corner at all. And Dennis Anderson has the worst pass of these 4, which is shocking at a 17.78.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you, that one lap is what makes it count, and it's such a crapshoot. And for Dennis, it doesn't matter how much you can dominate. You screw up once, and now you don't have the number you want.
Oh, yeah. He says, my last pass stunk. I took it easy in the chicane. I should have bonsai'd it, slid out pretty wide, just trying to be conservative. And that's exactly what it is. If you go back and you look at it, he's just waiting to get on that throttle far too long. And by that point, he's already lost probably a half a second to a second right there. Black Stallion with the cleanest looking pass of the night for Vaughters. Almost appeared to have too much speed going into the corner, but then used the brakes to kind of pivot on that left front tire to bring the truck around. 17.18, fastest time so far. And of those 5 trucks that we've seen go, we've had some heavy hitters involved here. We've had Gravedigger, we've had Escalade, we've had Iron Outlaw, and the fastest of those 5, Black Stallion. It's shocking to me that Vaughters could come out here with far less horsepower and be the fastest thing.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. It's because he got a horse on the side of the truck.
Yeah, that's an extra, 1 horsepower on each side? So there's 2. I think he's got 1 on the hood, so that's 3 extra horsepower that he's got right there.
Yeah, and at that time, he wasn't doing, like, a credible amount of stadiums. I mean, he was still, like, the token arena Trent, So it's a good opportunity for him to fly.
Oh, yeah. I will mention, just throw it out there, Black Stallion was a perennial World Finals competitor at this point. This was I believe the first World Finals for this Black Stallion chassis as well. But what really put Mike on the map was World Finals 3, when he has that freestyle where I can still hear Mike Hogwood in my ear right now. He knocked it down, knocking down that I believe it was a semi-trailer, just tears it straight down, and for the rest of the night it's just nothing but a pile in that corner because Vaughters tore it up. And I think he went on to get 3rd in that freestyle championship. I could be wrong. Like I said, don't kill me in the comments, people. I think he got 3rd overall on that one. But that's what put Mike Vaughters on the map, and he's still living off of that going into this World Finals right here. Donkey Kong, Frank Krimmel, very slow in the turn, careful around the corner. Tightest turn of the night, though. Conservative, but he still goes fast as a 17.07.
I was such a big Donkey Kong fan. You have no idea.
Man, I couldn't get behind Donkey Kong. I really couldn't. I like the tie on the front of it hanging down. I like the Nintendo branding is kind of cool. Don't get me wrong. Any Nintendo branding is awesome because you're playing with power, obviously. But I don't know. The Donkey Kong truck, just weird to me, especially when they put the googly eyes on it.
Yeah, this was pure. I mean, this was like the first full season for the truck, so Googly Eyes was still on point, and I just loved it. I was an obnoxious kid. I still obnoxious, but I love that truck.
Captain's Curse is quick through Thunder Alley right here. Gets on the brakes really soon. He tried to do what Krimmel did. He bobbled a little bit mid-corner, but it actually seemed to help him a little bit. He goes about a half second quicker than the rest of the field at this point at 16.56. Is at this time what we've seen is the fastest, and it's not a time to be slouched at here, Phil. 16.56, and on a track that seems to be going away. I mean, Blackwell's done really good right here.
Yeah, and I think this is a good flex of muscles, even though he is a Vegas rookie. he's one of those veterans that's like he's been in the truck and been around, and this is his first big chance to really prove that worth, especially in a defending truck. And it's a great tip of the hat, and definitely a good sign to see for many years to come in some of these brackets where Alex is very much a contender.
Oh yeah, Alex was always a contender. Destroyer is a little bit squirrely in Thunder Alley and gets down the straightaway okay. Turn was okay. Bad run overall, though, for Dan. 18.28 for the new Destroyer. Claims he had no front steering on the pass, which explains why he was all over the place on the straightaway. Says he was one of the fastest trucks the night before and claims to have made a 15-second pass. I don't know about that, but
yeah, that's a little yeah, I don't want to assume, but I am assuming that that's horsey.
Might have been a little fabrication. But anyway. Monster Mutt smooths through the chicane, pushes a little bit out far in the corner, just like Dennis did, but without the overcorrection that Dennis had. A strong chicane, a strong straightaway puts him second overall, 16.84.
Big flex.
Oh, yeah, big flex for Chucky Pauken. He did not do the Chucky dance, however, though, and I was very sad to see this. Monster Mutt Dalmatian, Candice Jolly coming out. Actually, excuse me, Monster Mutt Dalmatian, normal driver, Candice Jolly. Tonight, though, driven by Chad Tingler. And Chad has a pretty good, decent run right here. He's normally the driver of Gravedigger number 14, 17.44. Like I said, the track's starting to go away. That's still a pretty decent time for Chad.
Yeah, another veteran move here. Him being in the World Finals instead of Candice is definitely, at that time, for the betterment of the event, Candice was still very much a brand new driver. Mm-hmm. And, a good testament. Chad would probably have produced that same number had it been in any other truck other than his Gravedigger.
Yeah, I agree. The next truck we see out here is Taz, and Taz heads through Thunder Alley and then stumbles down the straightaway, eventually just completely stopping in the corner. Mark points out that the motor doesn't sound right. He says that there's fuel in the exhaust head or something obviously way wrong with Adam, but we never really get the exact reason what happened to Taz. A DNQ for, again, one of probably the big favorites in this field.
Yeah, and that's a massive storyline, especially knowing, what Adam's going to have to go through in the bracket. That's such a handicap, and to be a favorite, now you have to knock out all the other favorites, more than likely.
Oh, yeah, and it's never a tough draw when you qualify or, like, low in the field. It's not like Penda days whenever you could kind of sandbag a little bit to try and get yourself a better round one matchup. Now you're going to be going against somebody that's probably way faster than you think he is in this bracket. And like you said, it's going to point out for Taz to be a little bit difficult later on. Pastrana 199, though, good first half of the track here. Has a good turn, just basically a good lap is what I put here in my notes. I still think it's funny. He's wearing a Red Bull driving suit.
Again, the goal for Cam McQueen this weekend is just to survive, and I think this pass is a great testament of doing just that.
Yep. Speaking of trying to survive, Jim Kohler, an Avenger, has a good first part of the track, and then all of a sudden, high sides, it rolls over in the middle of the corner, and he's the only truck I'm really seeing that picks up that right front or left front tire going around the corner that hard. So it makes me wonder if he's got a really loose sway bar in the back that he's experimenting with that it brings the truck over. But Kohler, the only guy the whole weekend to get on two wheels and roll over at this point.
Yeah, and isn't any surprise as Jim Kohler? By no means.
Absolutely not.
never the racing guy, and especially in this era, it's if he wins a round of racing, it's very much a win on the weekend.
Oh yeah, exactly. He wins one round of racing, and they're going to go back to the pits and celebrate like it's 1999.
Yeah.
But speaking of guys that can go out here and win this entire thing, we got Tom Mintz, Maximum Destruction. A lot of wheel spin off the start, but obviously the strongest chicane we've seen the entire night. Tom comes out and eventually runs a 16.13 for Max D. Top qualifier, taking over that spot from Alex Blackwell by almost over half a second. Tom just schooled everybody here. He showed exactly what he can do out here on this track.
Yeah, this is the definitive flex of Tom Mintz. You know him now as the professor, and this is definitely one of those teaching everyone moments that, you have to beat him every single time, and he'll find a way. And just this number, it's like, I knew he was going to take the lead, but by such a significant margin, I think that really shook up a lot of people for the rest of the passes and for the weekend.
Oh, yeah, it definitely shakes everybody up. When you go out there and you're that quick, and you're that much faster than everybody, I mean, that's got to put some doubt in everybody's mind. And if I'm the guys that are going to race in round number 1, and then knowing that I have to take Tom Mintz on in the very next round, I'm probably thinking, what am I going to do while they're out there the rest of the evening? Because I'm not going to beat him.
Yeah.
We got Batman, the defending world champion, John Cesack. Just real quick here, it was an emotional win for Cesack the year before, and also an emotional win for Cody Saucier, his crew chief at the time. I mean, when you see them out there, they're hugging on top of the truck. It's one of the best moments in the sport's history. I don't care who you are. John Cesack is one of the perennial favorites in the sport, fan favorites in this sport. It's always been one of my favorite World Finals moments. While we're talking about it, though, Phil, what's one of your favorite World Finals moments?
Oh my gosh! Well, I mean, there's so many, from a personal level, but I just know like this World Finals in the freestyle competition. It's this madhouse with that triple bus stack and such iconic moments just from that alone. But I think, honestly, my favorite, and it's pretty much selfish, is the most recent World Finals at the time we're filming this. Jimmy Creighton finally winning the World Racing Championship out in Orlando. It was just such a – of course, we have to leave Las Vegas for Jimmy to get it done. And
oh, yeah.
That was Jimmy Creighton fashion. He wasn't anywhere – he was the second slowest qualifier of the entire weekend. He somehow finds a way to win. It's that Dale Earnhardt moment. We're NASCAR dorks too, you know.
I don't know if it's Dale Earnhardt moment. It was kind of a Mark Martin. I always considered Jimmy Creighton to be like the Mark Martin of the Monster Jam World Finals. He was the perennial runner-up.
Yeah, that's a good.
It seems like every year he was semifinals or he was finals, and he just couldn't quite get there.
Yeah, I think I kind of look at it because but he has like that freestyle championship, and he's a consistent winner too. So it's not like this is a little engine that could even like an unknown. It's not like Lindsey Reed, who won freestyle, also won racing too. So it's for me that was pretty cool. It was very cathartic that would happen in that such scenario, that this curse would just end after 20 years.
Yep, I agree. Batman runs 16.62 here for John. He's number 3 so far. Scarlet Bandit comes out next. It's a pretty deceiving looking run. They give it a 16.97, which is pretty quick for Don Creighton standards. And I'm not throwing Don under the bus. I'm just saying that it looked pretty slow overall. So slow that I went back and I timed this run myself. From start to finish, she's 18:35 for me. So somebody somewhere hit the start switch, or maybe even just stopped it a little bit too soon. As far as her run, because there's no way that's a 16.97.
Yeah, I don't think we were using the fancy timing systems that we do now with Monster Jam back then. So there's so much discrepancy. I mean, somebody could have been, halfway down a ham sandwich there, and oh crap, she's coming down Thunder Alley. Let me hit the start button. And of course,
yeah, exactly. I mean, if I remember correctly, Monster Jam used to do it where they had 3 people running watches, and they would take the middle time.
Yeah,
I think that's the way that they used to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe all 3 of them were on the slow side here when they hit the start button. I mean, it was just really weird that it would be that much of a discrepancy here in the qualifying. Right. Anyway, we'll move on. We'll go to El Toro Loco. We get a close-up of Lupe's helmet, which just has this giant bull grin on it, which I just find it funny that it's got this giant toothy smile all the way around it. Tight corner for Lupe, good run overall. 1781 though is the time. Makes me wonder if they got those mixed up with him and Scarlet Bandit. But anyway, Bounty Hunter with a great chicane down the straightaway. The turn cost Jimmy a lot of time though. He grazes the middle pole, but it doesn't fall over. Shows you how close he was to it. But he does. He pushes out way wide here. The rear tires catch the center of the obstacle before he gets to the finish line. A shame for Jimmy Creighton. Could have been on what was looking to be one of the top 2 times before the bobble right there. He's given a 5-second penalty as well to add insult to injury. 25-second pass for, again, one of the favorites.
Yeah, and this is just textbook Jimmy Creighton at World Finals, and I know there'll be another one later on where Jimmy would just find a way not to put it all together and just have himself behind the 8 ball, really out of just mistakes that should not be happening.
Exactly. And I'll point out the year before, too. Jimmy was the double down for number 1 qualifier the year before, and his run was flat out amazing in qualifying the year before. He claims he never touched the rear steering in that pass. He just slid the truck around the corner. What happened the very next day? He's number one qualifier. He gets beaten round number one
Yeah.
because he couldn't replicate that pass. Like he knew, yeah, he kind of knew number one qualifier that season was a fluke.
Yeah,
But
big time.
But anyway, we move on. We go to Safe Auto here. Great run for Mark Mcdonald. 1670 puts him in the top five. I didn't really put many notes there because it was just a textbook run. I mean,
Yeah, and
Mark.
that's sneaky Mark Mcdonald, and that's always been Mark's career. And it's not this time. This is only like a second or third year in the truck. And as the years go on, you realize he's probably one of the strongest drivers never to win a world championship, especially in racing. And this is
Oh, I agree.
Run.
I agree. He's one of the most consistent drivers out there. Consistency is a key this weekend. But speaking of some storylines that we have going into this event, Blue Thunder, Lindsey Wink, first time driving Blue Thunder in Vegas, first time being what is considered to be the number one Blue Thunder driver. This is a lot of people I know were a little bit upset Tony Farrell wasn't behind the wheel this weekend. But when you look at Lindsey Wink, you see he's a younger guy. I can kind of understand from a marketing standpoint why they would throw Wink in there. Also, I don't want to speak ill of Tony Farrell. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever met, but probably not the choice here as far as the World Finals goes for this year. I think Lindsey was a little better stats-wise that entire year.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, if you're watching Monster Jam on Speed at this time, the Lindsey Wink coming out party when he got into the Iron Outlaw, and still riding this momentum, and that's a very good reason when he was no longer with the team and he ends up driving Blue Thunder. He's still riding that Iron Outlaw momentum, and there was no way for Tony to do that unless Tony Farrell went out and won every weekend, which wasn't happening at this time.
Farrell wasn't going out there and setting the world on fire. Wink was. This pass puts him in the top five with a 16.66. David Smith, King Crunch, comes out here, wins the award for most flags on a truck for the weekend, I think. Over rotates in this pass, though, but still manages a 16.78. I mean, that's not bad for King Crunch.
No, and David Smith's another one sneaky where no one, when you look back on years later, realize how he was fairly decent racer at the World Finals. Obviously, he never got a World Championship, but when you do look back at some of these runs, it's even the ones that he wasn't winning, he was keeping it together.
Yeah, he was. Stone Crusher, Steve Sims says there's a vibration in the truck. The crew is trying to figure out what it is. He's confident going into this pass, but wiggles in Thunder Alley really bad. And in the corner, it just stops, kind of like Taz did. Loses power. Did not qualify here for Steve Sims. I'm not sure exactly what happened. They never really go back and tell you in the qualifying broadcast what happened to Steve.
Yeah, and obviously they do get it resolved as the weekend progresses. It was just very early gremlins. When you look back, Steven, that's his son, Steve Sims he's a Vegas rookie. He's still fairly new into the driving scene here with Stone Crusher. From Gary Wiggins. And I know 2008 was very much a breakout year that gave him this opportunity. So this could just really be early gremlins. Now you're on the big stage with the big boys and with the big trucks, and not able to figure out something maybe one of the more experienced teams would not overlook.
Yeah, and I mean there are a lot of people here, and I know it's something Steve Sims has touched on in later years after this. How a lot of people probably never thought that Stone Crusher deserved to be at the World Finals. This is one of those things that they would point to and be like, oh, look, you can't even get down the track for qualifying. He would go on to prove that he does belong to be in this lineup. But at this World Finals, it doesn't seem like everything is 100% for him. And it kind of sucks because I always did like Steve. He was another one of the nice guys that I've met out here. Superman, next truck out, Chad Fortune, has a good first half of the track, but the second half really hurts him. He tries to cut into the corner too early, and he has to back off the entry. He pushes a little bit wide. 1772 the overall time. Just not a good run for a guy at this point that is a Vegas veteran.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking. And unfortunately, when you look back on Chad Fortune in World Finals, I don't think anybody says Chad's is a favorite or going to be a winner. And I'm sure we look at his racing record, definitely doesn't support that he is a favorite in any means. So. Yeah, unfortunately, this is not to knock Chad. This is very much a textbook Chad Fortune run that, he's not going to be in the upper half, but, he's just going to go out there and at least get it across the finish line.
Yeah, I agree. And he has, at least he's a consistent driver, we'll put it that way. And maybe very slow consistent, but still consistent.
Yes.
Uh, Air Force Afterburner is the last truck out here. Can I just say really quick, this was one of my absolute favorite paint schemes that Monster Jam has ever put out. I love the Air Force Afterburner. I have an RC body in the back. I'm going to find some truck to put it on. I used to have it on a truck. I sold that truck, but I'm going to find some truck to put that body on. It's too cool not to run. Uh, a really good run here, though, from Damon. He does slide out a little bit on the exit from Thunder Alley. Puts him sixth overall, though, at 16.75. I mean, just textbook Damon here. I mean, he might have been a little squirrely, but he still got the pass down, and he still had a fast pass.
And this is why Damon was such a strong racer. And even then, this is still very young in Damon Bradshaw's career. Another one that never got a Racing World Championship, but
probably deserved it.
I'm sure he would trade in the Freestyle Championship. He wins the next year for a racing one if he could.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Top 8 we have right here, though. Max D, no surprise at number 1. Number 2, a big surprise to me, Alex Blackwell, Captain's Curse. Number 3, not a surprise at all, the defending world champion, Batman, John Seasock. Blue Thunder, Lindsey Wink at number 4. Safe Auto, number 5. Air Force Afterburner, 6. King Crunch is a surprise to me at number 7. And Monster Mutt, old Charlie Pawkins sitting right there at number 8. He's going to get a bye. And names you don't see right there, notables. Gravedigger's 18th, the Bounty Hunter 21st, Taz 22nd. Horrible qualifying results for those 3 trucks.
Yeah, and and then again, you look at guys like David Smith. I would imagine he would not have made top 8 in King Crunch had some of these other notables be able to have a better run. But again, I think that speaks to where jitters and so many other factors. And, to just continue what I was saying about David Smith, how he able to piece it together and just stay in the mix. And, that he benefits from these mistakes and puts a lot of pressure on these Anderson boys and Jimmy Creighton that it's not going to be easy to get to the finals.
No, not going to be easy at all. Just in case everyone doesn't know, this event and just about every televised event from 2000 to 2011 are on the Monster Jam YouTube page. You can get them for a small monthly fee, $5.99. You can go back and watch some of the greatest events in monster truck history for those 11 years. And I know they're going to add more eventually. And I mean, this is a service that I've used for quite some time, Phil. I don't know about you, but it's something that you can go back and, like I said, you can go back and relive some of the glory days.
Yeah, and it's so important just to have that archive sitting there. And it's always one where, from being a stats guy, very much a historian of what's going on currently, this is very much important to have these episodes in a position like this. And for that price, you're getting there's a lot of episodes, so many years. It's well worth it. And it definitely, you're not going to run out, because by the time you're done watching one part, you're going to go back and rewatch something else, because that's how many episodes are in there. And they're continuing to add to catch up with what's going on currently. So you're going to have a massive archive for over 20 years.
Oh yeah, you got a huge, massive archive in there. I really enjoy going. I mean, this is how I studied for this show right here. I couldn't find the racing broadcast on YouTube. Found the qualifying, could not find racing. The story of this whole episode is told in the beginning. The story is John Seasock trying to make it 2 in a row, but he's got Tom Mintz in his sights. That's literally the entire story at the opening of this, is they just talk about those 2 drivers. And I almost had to do a double take. I'm like, you got 24 trucks in this field, and you're just going to mention the number 1 qualifier and Seasock wanting to be a double champion in racing.
Yeah, that's a little disheartening, especially knowing some of the other the key players going on here. But that's kind of the problem when you have an hour broadcast.
You have a 45-minute broadcast. You got to time in 15 minutes of commercial time.
Exactly.
So you got 45 minutes to get this entire racing bracket in, and we'll save my opinions on it for later. But anyway, this season's Speed Channel opening is not good as far as I was concerned. It was very weird. We get some clips and some very weird music, and it's just downer music for me. I mean, when you're thinking, even NASCAR, with IndyCar, they use some upbeat music to bring you into the show. This is like a funeral march. Yeah,
and that's never fun. And sometimes the consistencies with the music, but yeah, that's always a stinker, especially World Finals. Like, get up on your feet. We're going to crown a world champion.
Yeah, I never understood why they got rid of the Standing Tall Up in Victory Lane song they used to have. That was a pump-up song that could really get people going. And this is just, like I said, it's like I'm expecting this broadcast to open up and you just see The Undertaker slowly lift his face staring at you. It's just weird.
Yeah, got so excited. Just a quick sidebar. Like when the NASCAR coverage, they used some of the old NASCAR and Fox music. They weren't using it for a good amount of time. Now they're using like the original tunes from like 2001. It's
If it ain't broke, like I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
Mark says he spoke with Tom Mintz. No, wait, I'm sorry. He says he spoke with Max D. He said, "Get me through Thunder Alley, put me on the track, and I will win this deal." An awkward little statement there from Mark. Shara interviews John Seesock. Seesock says that he's very thankful for his crew, which he always was very good about thanking his crew. Very good about thanking Cody, especially. Confident they can go back to back.
I agree. It's very humble of John Seesock. Again, that's why I think he's very much a fan favorite. Just little things like that, and it goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Seesock would always take time to talk to people, and I think that's why he was a big fan favorite. It didn't matter how long his autograph line was. He'd sit there and he'd talk to you for a good couple of minutes if you'd like to. It's noted into the intro here that Bobby Parr has only raced at the World Finals. This year he's doing both competitions. I'd also forgot that Bobby only made one racing pass the season before he lost to Tony Farrell, who was driving Blue Thunder the year previous. Frank Krimmel freestyled the truck. Odd they did this. However, one can only assume that each driver was deserving enough to compete for a shot in Vegas, so they had to split the ride.
Yeah, and that's another one, too, where it's a sponsored ride, and Bobby was still a fresh face in the truck, and I'm sure they probably wanted the best performance for that, and they figured 2008 is a good year to let Bobby swim on his own. But at the end of the weekend, I think he does put together a respectable freestyle.
Well, honestly, Bobby had a pretty good 2008 season. I was there in St. Louis that year where he won the Wheelie of the Year award, where he slap wheelied all the way across that stadium floor. The guy had a really good opening run in St. Louis, and I think that run right there was where they said, you know what, Bobby can hold his own.
It's just unfortunate where he doesn't really get to capitalize on that. He's not driving too much longer.
Yeah, but I think that was his choice. Honestly, a lot of people, I've spoke with Bobby Parr. He was a nice guy. He was a really nice guy. I think that, and we're going to get off on a little sidebar here, but I think the reason that he didn't drive any much longer after that was when Suzuki pulled out, he had no interest in doing it.
Yeah, I could see that too. And if you read some old archives, there was original talks that he was going to be the driver of Air Force Afterburner.
Yeah, I heard that as well.
Came in too. But I mean, Bobby's still active, up until there's some shifts due to the global pandemic. If there was Quad Wars at a Monster Jam event, there was a very good chance you would see Bobby Parr up till 2020. So he was still very much active.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The same is noted about Frank Krimmel a little bit later in this, saying that he freestyled the truck last year, so this is his first shot getting to drive his own truck here at the World Finals. This is Lindsey Wink's debut in Blue Thunder. Wink's story and how he got to that seat was, man, just dominance, really. His I think it was 7 events in a row that he won in his debut season driving Iron Outlaw. He also won probably one of the most prestigious events in monster truck history. That was the last Monster Jam at the Pontiac Silverdome. Then they had the big split with him and Jimmy Cretin. It's a mystery to this date as to why they split up, but when that split happened, there's still a lot of bad blood between those two drivers. They don't really touch on this very much, if ever, on TV. There's subtle little pokes at it. But I think this is one thing where they really missed the opportunity to be like, you know what? We should really talk about this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that might have been too close to the sun. I'm sure, it's like your first day being a smart fan in monster trucks. I think you hear the tinfoil theories on why Lindsey Wink was not driving Iron Outlaw any longer. But either way, he still proved dominance. And I always found it funny about Lindsey Wink where it's like, again, we talked about earlier, Iron Outlaw coming out party. But at this point where he's driving Blue Thunder now, he's driving for just under 10 years. Yeah. I don't think people realize that. I mean, he's still very much a young man and still a young gun in that aspect of dominance, but he's driving a long time. And people forget about those Jurassic Attack years. And it's a great stepping stone when you really look at the levels. It's not like Lindsey Wink was handed anything. He definitely earned his keep in every truck.
He earned everything that he had.
Yes.
There's no question about that whatsoever. And everybody wants to talk. There are some people out there that want to say, Lindsey Wink really didn't do much in Monster Jam. Well, you don't know what you're talking about, son.
Yeah, it's a little
do some research.
Yeah, it's a little distorted when you look at the next 10 years. 1 year he wins his tour, then the next year he doesn't win anything. So that's kind of where that's why the Lindsey Wink story gets kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, but you can say that. Oh, he won this tour, but he didn't win the anything the next year. That happens in NASCAR all the time. Look at
Yeah,
Kyle Busch. He wins a championship, and the next year he only wins one race. This year
exactly.
he's running like crap. It happens. But
Hmm.
anyway, off the sidebar. We hop back in here. I attended Wink's first show in Blue Thunder, which was a Monsters on Main Street event. The promotion, they brought it to Kankakee, Illinois. The winner was from Crete, Illinois. I don't really remember too much of the show other than Charlie Pawkins slapwheeling and killing a telephone pole. But I do remember Wink rolling over and racing, and I do believe he won freestyle. And if I remember correctly, he won the wheelie contest as well. So and they made a big deal about Lindsey Wink at that event. They talked about him quite a bit and how they were extremely happy to get him behind the wheel of this truck. And man, they got a driver. We'll put it that way. They got a real good driver for this truck.
Sure did, and he's still strong.
We get a great onboard shot here from the front of Max D. We'll see the full pass here from Tom. Easily the smoothest run from the double down night in qualifying. Mintz has not won racing here since 2002. Mintz believes the pressure is on, and Mintz believes the pressure is on the other 23 competitors and not him. And that's a statement that Tom has said previously to just at any other World Finals. This
Yeah.
pressure's never on him; it's always on the competitor.
Yeah, and that's just the mind games of Tom, and again, how those first ones are just lumped in really early on, and those first championships, and it doesn't. It's not about me; it's about everybody else, and that's how he's able to slide in and win another one.
Oh yeah, and speaking of this, we see Tom Mintz kind of riding around on his chopper around the stadium, which I always like this little clip of him riding on that BMC chopper around that place as they're plugging some sponsors. We get into round one, though. Team Suzuki and Stone Crusher. Winner here, though, has a very big misfortune in the next round, and that's taking on Tom Mintz. Parr has the better pass here. The truck pushes a bit wide on corner exit, but he still takes the win over Steve Sims. And one thing I'm noticing here, Phil, in a lot of these races, and you'll see it throughout the rest of this bracket, is that corner is treacherous for these guys.
Yeah, it's especially how that I think when you look at a lot of World Finals and you see these corners, the way it's really much contingent on how the freestyle track is built and how much leeway you have in that corner. And I think it's a good indicator, especially when you look at basically Bobby Parr's a rookie still. I mean, I know it's not, but still a fresh guy. And Steve Sims' first competitive pass at the World Finals. What a race to really define that right off the bat.
Scarlet Bandit, Superman right here. Both of these drivers struggle on this track. First through Thunder Alley, though, is Superman. He goes on to take the win. Dawn pushes way too hard in Thunder Alley. She tried really hard to zing it into the corner as well. She was in the right lane for this, and I think she just tried way too hard right here. She goes way wide and just kind of hands the win to Chad, like, here you go, Superman.
This very much again like that first race. Two competitors that just match up, I think, correctly on maybe skill levels as well. And another one that just shows, the track, man. You don't overthink it, especially if your last name's Cretan. You got to be careful on these tracks.
Exactly. The name Cretan and Vegas don't go together very well.
God.
Destroyer and an Escalade right here. Scott Douglas always pushed George Belhan on these TV shows as a driver that could break through and win at any moment. George, in my eyes, was already a superstar at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think where a lot of it, he just needs that one victory. And even now, knowing that George is not an active competitor, I really don't know what's a defining victory for George Belhan. That was always his big misfortune. Very much a top competitor, and he has the wins, but he doesn't have that one key victory.
Exactly. That's the shame for George. He was always a favorite in Vegas, though.
Yeah.
I always liked his interviews. He was calm, he was cool, he was collective, and he knew how to talk. It's a shame he never won a world championship, but he's still probably most known as the guy that could really do that rebound backflip at the Vegas World Finals. He's the first guy to ever really do a successionable backflip like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just still a cool sight to see. I think unfortunately, that's probably the one move that he's really known for to a lot of these younger kids out there, and not his days in the Escalade where he was just killing it with all these awesome walking wheel stand saves that he did.
Agreed.
Doesn't get shown as often as it should. We'll put it that way. Dan Evans is on his A game here, though, and it's no easy pass for George in an Escalade. This is the first of many photo finishes of the night. George gets the win by about a tire length. And when you look at the two drivers here, I think a lot of people would have expected George to just kind of walk away with this. But Dan kind of comes back and maybe kind of puts some like takes some of the words out of my mouth that I was saying earlier about that 15-second pass that he claimed he ran, because he ran a really good one here against George.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Exactly what I was thinking. If maybe Dan got to race one of the other four competitors in the previous round, would have been an easy win for Dan and really maybe shake up whoever he had next in the bracket. But he gets the hand of George here. Great race overall, and another good win for George.
Yep. Iron Outlaw and Bounty Hunter, probably the strongest pairing in round number 1 right here, and strongest not just because of who's pairing against who, but because of what motor is in what truck. I mean, there is some horsepower on the line here for this pass. 2 Extreme Racing has 2 big guns facing off in round number 1. Cretan had a horrible qualifying pass that put him in this predicament, and Craig was first out in qualifying. He just didn't have the run that he needed. Neither can be happy with their seating right here. Second photo finish of the night, though, is they go right to the line. Both guys have excellent passes. One trend that I'm seeing so far, though, is that the fast times are coming from the guys that are just coming from it. Like they're hitting a dead stop in the middle of the corner and then getting back onto the throttle. Both drivers here do that, and they both have extremely good passes. It was like synchronized monster truck racing watching this pass.
Yeah, it's like clockwork. If you squint your eyes too hard, you'd be kind of confused which is which. I know paint schemes are drastically different, but they are the same bodies and the flags and the whole 9 yards, and their driving styles very similar. I mean, these guys, they go way back to the mid-'90s when really both of them first got started in the sport. They did a lot of it together, and it's fast forward 15 years later, and here they are in the grandest stage doing it again.
Yeah. The slow-mo really kind of tells a story here as to why Cretan won this race. You see that Cretan is dead straight flying across the finish line, nose down, whereas Craig's nose is just slightly up in the air, and that's what cost him the win right here. Man, if the nose would have been down, I think they have a dead heat.
Yeah, and again, no timing systems back then, so that's
at that point, I think the officials would have been up in the booth looking at each other like, you gonna call that or me?
Yeah, no good. That's why we have the timing systems now, folks. There's no way you're gonna get a call like that incorrect. But man, it's just Craig gets the loss here, and it's just his weekend goes from bad to worse, and he'll get in the freestyle and just not do very well there either, and it's just a weekend I think Craig wants back, and unfortunately it's his only World Finals competitive appearance.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for a guy that's as good as Craig Christensen is. Anyway, though, next round here we've got Taz minus a tooth. I don't know if you noticed it when he pulled to the line here, but there's one tooth that's just barely hanging on, that's swaying back and forth on Taz against Monster Mutt Dalmatian here. Battle of friends here, Chad Tingler and Adam Anderson.
Yeah, and I mean, for all intents and purposes, teammates. Adam Anderson drove Dennis's Gravedigger in 2007, so I'm sure these guys really grew up a lot, too, around each other in North Carolina.
Oh, yeah, and again, we get another great race. The left lane, though, is getting the wins here. Taz gets about a tire-length victory over the Mutt. These guys have always been good friends, as we've said, and this ride has been one of their favorites. The replay shows, like I said, synchronized monster truck racing yet again, just a fantastic race between these two guys.
Yeah, textbook there. One of those early things we talked about. Adam Anderson's going to have to go through the bracket. He gets a tough competitor, Chad Tingler, not in his usual truck, but that's veteran experience and
exactly. And let's talk about veteran experience here. Just to kind of a sidebar again. I mean, you throw a guy like Chad Tingler in the Monster Mutt Dalmatian, you're probably thinking, oh, that's not a Gravedigger truck. He's not going to run that hard in it. It's virtually the same chassis that he was driving beforehand, though. I mean, it's not like you're taking a guy and you're throwing him and putting him in Tom Mintz's truck that's a front engine thing with no sway bars. You're putting him in a truck that he's kind of probably going to be familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's as the next decade rolls on, it's very much common in Monster Jam, where the chassis are so similar where just changing the seats out is really all you need to do to make sure these competitors can stay competitive. And Chad Tingler, again, is somebody that's been around these trucks a lot, where he has a little bit extra edge where I think maybe later veterans in the sport don't have that, just because of Chad's background working on these trucks, where he can make that Dalmatian just go a little bit farther than any other.
Exactly. Next matchup, though, El Toro Loco and Black Stallion. It's noted here that RL is Lupe's crew chief. I don't know if anybody has known the name that I'm speaking of here, but RL was the crew chief on Medusa when she won her world championship, and he seemed to be the only guy that could really put her behind the wheel of a truck that could really showcase her driving talents. It's just one of those guys, like I said, that could get any truck going and pointed the right direction. Between him and Dustin Brown, they were the two guys that were mentioned quite a bit on Monster Jam television. A good crew chief choice here for Lupe, who was probably one of the guys that probably needed it at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do find interesting where this is mentioned a lot with some of these crew chiefs, and something that they really don't hammer too hard unless you are Dustin Brown. And this is a great choice for Lupe. Again, in this point in his career, needed that extra push, and there's a great guy behind him.
Speaking of great guys, though, we got Mike Vauders here as well, one of the guys who's given a lot of people a good start in the industry. And another photo finish, Phil. We've got Black Stallion, El Toro Loco coming to the line, and in a little bit of a surprise to me, Vauders gets the win.
That's the sleeper in Mike Vauders, where this is really, I think, a peak for Mike Vauders in his career, and this is a very strong win. It doesn't really surprise me too much. I think these competitors match up very well, and Mike keeps it together a little bit harder than Lupe and El Toro.
Yeah, it seems like El Toro Loco and Lupe Sosa tried to have an exit at the corner like Adam and Tingler had done previously. Did not work out in his favor. Truck got a little bit loose. He had to correct it, whereas Vauders was just consistent, and he holds on to take the win.
Yeah, that's a lot of what happens in World Finals. Sometimes competitors just overthinking, and you just keep hitting your marks, and you'll pick up some round wins that maybe you don't think that you would either way.
Exactly. Gravedigger and Donkey Kong here. Probably the biggest surprise to be in round number one is Dennis Anderson and Gravedigger, and a phenomenal pass right here for Digger number 20. Dennis cutting a mid 15-second lap time here. Frank basically stops on the corner exit, and Dennis just flies. This Digger 20 is on a rail on this track at this point. We get a little bit of an interview later on with Dennis. We'll touch on that in a little while. But the track at this point fits number 20 perfectly.
Yeah, it's those round one races, there's always somebody that just has to make a statement, and this is a statement race for Dennis Anderson. Again, knowing that he's got to fight through the bracket maybe where he didn't want to start, and unfortunately Frank Krimmel was the first victim.
Oh yeah, the Donkey Kong, basically Mario probably paid Digger just a little bit extra money on that pass to take out the monkey. But anyway, Avenger and Pastrana 199. Avenger looking really good here with the bright green body that's on the truck. Always known for being one of those trucks that did something different at the World Finals, and it always put me in the mind of like the NASCAR All-Star race. When Jim Kohler would come to the World Finals, he has a different paint scheme every single time. The guy that started that tradition, Dale Earnhardt, in the NASCAR race when he showed up with a silver GM Goodwrench Chevrolet. Oh, by the way, who was Jim Kohler's favorite NASCAR driver? Dale Earnhardt. Kind of taking a little bit out of Dale's book right here, and it's something that we look forward to every single year for Vegas.
That's funny you mentioned that, Josh. I was right when you were saying that. I'm like, oh, didn't he fly the 3 flag when Dale passed in 2001?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, 2001.
That makes so much sense. Definitely good inspiration. I'm curious if if that is 100% why, but it makes so much sense. And man, that was always a big thing, and it still is. Jim's still always running wacky bodies whenever the World Finals pops up, or he did it for some of the other extra events too. And it's always one of those big. It's a built-in story for Jim, and it's always fun to see.
It's one thing that keeps the Avenger name hanging around too.
Yes,
to compare it to a pro wrestling thing, it's like the Undertaker. Whenever he needs to freshen up his gimmick every now and then, he'll throw on a different pair of gloves or something like that. It's just something. Oh, that's different. That's something that you can take with Jim Kohler's Avenger.
Right.
There was almost sometimes people in Vegas would feel a little bit cheated because they didn't get to see the green truck. So that's probably why he brought out this bright neon looking green one right here. But man, the race that they have here it's an okay one. Cam McQueen has a decent pass here. So does Jim. The ironic thing that we have is just a few years later, these guys would basically tie for a freestyle championship, but Kohler would steal it from him.
Yeah, it's pretty funny and very indicative of where these two competitors are at right now in their careers, and especially Cam McQueen, knowing that he becomes one of the top freestylers in the game, and he does become a better racer too, especially towards the later arc of his career.
Yeah. Avenger gets the win here, just kind of sneaks past Pastrana 199 at the line. And if you're keeping track, folks, 5 photo finishes in the first 8 races of the night.
It's a tight bracket, and again, a lot of these races, I said it a lot too, a lot of these matchups, the competitors paired up very nicely, and they're not the fastest passes, but when you have 2 competitors that really have the same skill levels or same truck setups, you're going to get a great race no matter what, and that's great for all the fans, and anybody, really fighting for a world championship. Makes it worth a little extra more at the end.
Yep. Coming out of round 1 here, obviously fastest time set by Gravedigger Dennis Anderson, 15.59, showing there's a ton of speed out there in this track. However, between rounds in Vegas, everybody knows this track starts to go away just a little bit. No matter how much water they put on it, it's eventually going to it's going to turn into a loose racetrack before the end of the night. Anderson, confident in his truck after round number 1. Those blue eyes have some sparkle into him all of a sudden when you talk about Dennis in this particular interview. Before round 2 starts, we get a huge surprise to a lot of people. Randy Brown comes out in Digger 19, decked out as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, and just puts on a freestyle mid-bracket.
I remember when this happened live. It wasn't like they played music or like a video. Everyone was just sitting there minding their business, and all of a sudden, that's the Ninja Turtle. Like, what's like? Somebody stop him! What's he doing here? It's always funny, and it's funnier now because Randy Brown, his history of the World Finals is always so goofy, and that's just right up there with Randy Brown. I can't picture it to be anybody else but Randy Brown.
Well, downtown Randy Brown puts on a really good show here in mid-bracket. So good that I think the officials might have had a little bit of a word with him afterwards. He destroys every turning pole out here on this track, I think, but has a really cool save off of the freestyle obstacle they have on the one side with the smiley face painted on it, the tanker stack. Just pirouette, noses it around, rips the front of the Ninja Turtle nose off. Just a really good little thing to kind of wake the crowd up a little bit. But honestly, I don't think they needed waking up. They were seeing some exciting racing right here.
I don't know why they did this. I would like some more clarity one day. Why did we just? Was there like a bet that's like, it'd be pretty funny if we just send out the Ninja Turtle. Then, let's just do it. Like, it's so weird.
I mean, it's weird, but it was unique, and I kind of liked it. I thought it was something just a little bit different for the time. I mean, had there been more downer races, I would have understood it a little bit more. I think they would have been better off to save this like before the semifinals or something like that, or right before the Elite 8 is what I call it. But Scott Douglas talks about how the cameras are down for the signs that we see in the crowd right before round number 2 right here. I don't think that's the case anymore because there's a lot of people that have complained about those signs over the years, and certain sporting events don't allow them anymore. I believe Monster Jam is one of them. But anyway, he points out that there's one race in here that is going to be pretty hyped, and that, of course, Bounty Hunter and Blue Thunder. It's a very interesting round 2 matchup we have right here. I was pretty hyped to see that this one was in there. We've got the former boss taking on the ex-employee with his new shiny toy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no avoiding the story now. And, I don't think these competitors really raced each other in 2008 prior to this. So this is very much, it's a grudge match. And it's sitting in round 2 with a lot of important implications.
Yep. Round number 2 starts off, though, with number 1 qualifier Tom Mintz taking on Team Suzuki and Bobby Parr. Parr has the worst draw of the competitors that won in round number 1. And, I mean, really not even a contest right here when you look at this race. Mintz just has one of those Tom Mintz World Finals passes and just completely destroys Team Suzuki right here. There is one thing, though, that was said. It looks like Tom Mintz says there's a lot of speed to be obtained out here in Vegas. You got to make sure your truck is completely straight and true going down Thunder Alley. I'm going to point this out just because we hear so many interviews like this throughout this entire show. They're pre-taped interviews that we get before most every pass in this particular side of the bracket. And it just drives me insane that they do pre-tapes before all of this and you don't get the live reaction after the fact.
It's almost as if there's too much going in the back because they have to have Randy Brown suit up in the Ninja Turtle. No interviews. We got to send the turtle.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they only had Shara for the first day of the World Finals, and she had to go fly and do something else. I don't know, but
wait, when is this show ending? Like, what?
yeah, it's just odd that they wouldn't have somebody back there to get a live reaction. I would have killed to have had a guy down there before the Cretan Wink race,
Oh, yeah,
just to get their impressions on that. But they don't do that, obviously. You get another pre-tape before that. It's just these pre-taped interviews. There's a time and a place for them, and this is not the time nor the place for this, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, though, Superman, Monster Mutt, another pre-taped interview. Chad Fortune says he's going to go out there and let it all hang out. It's a phrase we've heard a million times before. Starting to miss watching some old Tough Tracks episodes at this point, to be perfectly honest with you. Pauken leads down Thunder Alley by about a truck going into the corner. We get a close-up of Superman, and we completely miss the action in the other lane between Pauken. Chucky gets a little loose on the exit, but holds on for the victory here. But, Phil, the thing that stood out to me was Mark Schrader basically saying, you know what, Chad Fortune had a really good pass. It was textbook, but Pauken beat him.
Yeah, and it's like it's almost like were they expecting Chad? We talked about Chad Fortune, not the perennial winner. It's like were they expecting him to come out here and dominate Charlie Pauken, who is
they shower him with compliments right here for his run that he lost by a half a truck.
Yeah, it's very very weird. It's again I don't understand why it's like they had that interview pre-done. They don't know where to put it because that pass against Scarlet Bandit wasn't the fanciest. So it's like where do we? I don't want to
And in fairness, neither was this. It was a clean pass. But if anything, they should be talking about how Pauken held it together to get across the line. He was a little bit loose and still came out and beat Chad right here by a half a truck.
Yeah, but at least a record book shows the last laugh. That's for sure.
Yeah, the record book shows the last laugh, but it's just an annoying thing to me.
Yeah.
Escalade and Safe Auto, George Belhan, yet another pre-taped interview talking about how in the last 3 years he's lost here by a nose. They are trying some new things on the truck. Him and his crew chief, Bobo Ben Winslow, one of the nicest guys, by the way. I love Bobo. Just one of those guys that if you talk to him, you're never going to forget it. We'll put it that way.
100%. I would agree with that.
George says that they have the truck zinging right now. That's a new phrase that I'm going to use for the rest of this podcast, just so you know. Mark Mcdonald in the left lane gets his own pre-taped interview as well. Mark talks about how getting through the tight turns on this course and more blah, blah, blah on that because we've already heard this from other drivers. We don't need to hear it 16 times. But anyway, side by side through Thunder Alley here with no real advantage between either truck. We get a close-up of Safe Auto going into the turn this time. Seeing the truck kind of wash out, power slide a little bit, and then it cuts back wide as we see George struggling on corner exit. The truck must have pinged instead of zinged because McDonald lays down one really good textbook pass here, and that is what a textbook pass should look like, just so Mark Schrader knows because of his previous call on Superman.
To not knock Mr. Devastator, Mark Schrader is never.
Yeah, I'm not going to knock Mark. I'm just saying that it was weird.
He doesn't know. He's never. Well, actually, if you do ask Mark, spoiler, he actually has done one of those like practice passes down Thunder Alley. He did it in a Gravedigger truck. Like he'll talk about it, but he's never competed. He don't know. But he brings the driver perspective. So, but nonetheless, looking at this race, I do kind of find it funny when you keep talking about these pre-taped interviews. It's like we asked everybody the same questions, and
exactly.
When somebody like Mark Mcdonald, which at this point he didn't race round one, and we've already had a good handful of races, we're not going back on Groundhog Day here. We know what the track's doing. Like let's see what you can do. Don't tell me the same thing and tell me to enjoy it.
Exactly. Cookie cutter interviews is the most annoying thing that I have here with this entire broadcast, and that's just another one of them. We've heard this like 3 or 4 other times already. This entire broadcast.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It makes no sense. Next up, though, the matchup they all came to see, Army. Blue Thunder and Bounty Hunter. Words cannot express the amount of bad blood that is felt between these two guys. To put it in perspective, and I wrote out a really long thing here. During first quarter of 2006, it seems like the monster truck equivalent to the Alan Prost, Ayrton Senna thing started right here. Behind the wheel of Iron Outlaw, you've got a driver that goes out and wins in his first 7 events, and his team owner is extremely happy. And then they broke up. And it turned into there was some words slung back and forth between these two guys that you can't say on this podcast and you can't say on TV. But I do remember I interviewed Jimmy Cretin a few years ago for allmonster.com. and I had to cut everything that he said about Jimmy Cretin out, or excuse me, about Lindsey Wink out, because of the situation that was going on there. And he did not get into exactly why the split happened, but I just felt that it wasn't something that should be posted out there online. We'll put it that way. And I'm not done. You're running the comments. I know what you're going to say. What do you say? I don't have the recording anymore.
What I heard he said was, come on, fellas. Just know what you know. Keep your tinfoil hat back in the kitchen drawer and just enjoy these two competitors.
But yeah, the reason I say Alan Prost and Ayrton Senna, though, is because if you don't know that rivalry from Formula One, they started out liking each other. They started out really liking each other, and then all of a sudden, Senna started to do a little bit better than Prost. And Prost kind of thought that he was the number one driver over there. And some things happened, and Prost left the team, and Senna got the number one driver spot, and there was a big incident in Japan that happened between those two. Let's just say that this is as close as the monster truck industry got to that rivalry.
Yup.
The race here, though, is kind of a blowout and a little bit of surprise. I think the pressure got to Wink just a little bit. He pushes wide, like way wide in Thunder Alley right here. He has a horrible entry into the straightaway, and by that point, Jimmy Cretin's already won the race.
Yeah, it's you hit it right there. It had been pressure, but again, very indicative of kind of Lindsey Wink inconsistencies where it counts, and Jimmy Cretin, he's keeping it together. Again, he's fighting through that back part of the bracket, and this got to be a big confidence boost for him, not only in World Finals, but just in life in general. But for the bracket purposes, big win for Jimmy Cretin.
Oh, yeah. One thing Scott Douglas says here, this will be an easy and believe me, very satisfying win for Bounty Hunter, and I agree for him because I can imagine, I could see the smile under Jimmy's helmet from when he crossed the finish line right here. Batman and Taz is the next race that we have here. Reigning champion Seasock versus Adam Anderson and Taz, who at this point is still an up-and-comer and has not won his first world championship. Spoiler alert, though, he does win freestyle here. Adam gets his first world championship later on in this evening, but we're not going to talk about freestyle. This is all about racing. Even though Seasock is a former champion, there are a lot of people that would consider him an inevitable underdog in this matchup.
Yeah, that's very, and we'll talk about it later on my thoughts on like John Seasock and, performances, but I totally agreed. This is, the young buck, the future is on the line here, and big task coming from the back in the bracket seeds, and he's got to go up against a reigning champion.
Yeah. Down Thunder Alley, we see Taz make the same mistake Blue Thunder did, though. Makes you wonder about that lane because Adam goes into Thunder Alley and just completely side slaps that wall on the right side with that truck. And that hurts the pass. Actually, no, I take that back. It doesn't hurt his pass. It actually helps him, I think. He's leading down the straightaway. He goes into the corner, and then he kind of washes out a little bit. And this was debated on for quite some time over whether or not he got the left front tire on that ramp. When you look at it head on, it almost looks like he does. But when you look at it at the angle that I know the officials are looking at, which is the camera angle that's pointed straight down at the track that we get a lot of side angles from that shows the photo finishes, it's a clear miss on that camera. I think that's the camera they went off of.
Yeah, this is still something that happens. And in current Monster Jam, this is still something that's so debated. I know... Again, at the time of recording is 2021. There was a big call against Corey Rummel and Rage in one of these brackets in Orlando over where the tire was, and it's still something that it's still a sore subject for a lot of people, and one that will always generate controversy, whether it's right or wrong.
And it's generated controversy since the early '90s when the sport was created. I can remember Eric Jasmer throwing a big fit in USA 1 at a race in Nashville, arguing whether or not they got the right front up onto the ramp. I mean, it's one of those calls that is so, I mean, what's the phrase that they use when they talk about the double line rule in NASCAR? It's the gray area rule.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this one is.
Yes.
Like I said, the head on camera shows one thing. The top of the arena, the top of the stadium camera shows another. I believe they made the right call. And that hurts coming from an Anderson fan and a Digger fan and somebody that really wanted to see Adam go far in this bracket. I believe they made the right call here. Adam Clearly, it doesn't look like it gets the tire up onto the jump. He may finish ahead of Seasock right here, but John gets the reprieve to go into the next round.
Yeah, that's. I agree. I think it's the right call, but that's very typical. And capitalizing on other people's mistakes, and he gets another chance to try to defend.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I got told years ago too by whenever I was trying to learn how to do the online sim racing stuff. Somebody told me I'm a lot more scared of somebody that puts down consistent lap times than I am of somebody that's putting down really fast lap times.
Exactly.
Air Force Afterburner and Black Stallion here. As these two line up, we get a good call from Mark saying that the track is consistently inconsistent. Very correct statement right here. Weather in Vegas changes rapidly. The NASCAR events here, man, if you listen to some of the broadcast, listen to like if you have the radio scanner, listening to those guys talking about how the weather changes, that racetrack in particular, it always seems like there's a little bit more banter and a little bit more stress into what adjustments do we need? What adjustments do we need? And I mean, here in Vegas at the dirt, it's the same exact thing. What adjustments do we need to make in between rounds? Because this track, like I said, it changes from round by round by round. It's going to get drier and drier and drier as we go. And they don't take a time to stop and water this track.
No way. It's show flow, baby. Got to keep going. You got to
exactly. NASCAR events at the Speedway are an interesting thing to listen to. Like I said, they go weather change about 3 hours on that track. The dirt here in Vegas, like I said, no different. Positive though to me that the right lane is starting to go away. I don't know if you've noticed the same thing that I have. Right lane just doesn't look as consistent as the left lane does.
Yeah, and that's always interesting where, sometimes the right lane can be a lot dominance, and that's a big noticeable change. And it could be a lot of the fact where some of these guys that are going down on the track are slinging it real hard, and just adding to the fact of the inconsistencies with weather, it can fade away real quick.
Yep. We've got another pre-taped interview here where Damon tells us how to get to the corner for about the 15th time on this broadcast. Damon has this race right out of the box, leads down Thunder Alley through the corner, has the better turn, pulling out a 2-truck length win over Vaughters. Bradshaw cuts a donut at the end of the track before going to park. It's a tradition that we saw Dennis Anderson do quite a lot. Damon kind of steals it right here. I mean, Vaughters was consistent right here. He just happened to be against a faster competitor at this point.
Yeah, this is another one of those matchups too where it's like he didn't do nothing wrong. It's just the other guy was better. And again, hats off to Mike Vaughters. But that's what you got to do. Saying it a lot. Just stay consistent. Didn't get the win, but it's better than going out there and laying an egg.
Yeah. Speaking of laying eggs, Gravedigger and King Crunch right here, classic pairing. They've been racing against each other for decades at this point, though it's not Scott Stevens behind the wheel of King Crunch. It's still always cool to see Gravedigger and King Crunch line up against each other, knowing how far back these particular truck names have been competing against each other. David Smith has King Crunch looking awesome, by the way. I haven't noticed that. I haven't talked about that yet. I love the paint scheme on this truck right now. Excuse me, the wrap that's on this truck with the playing card kind of analogy on the side of it with the king. Always been my favorite King Crunch paint scheme, and it was this paint scheme that finally took over for Auto Value King Crunch for me.
Yeah, and that original body that David had done up, that was all hand painted, so a lot of effort into it.
Oh, that was completely hand painted. I thought it was a wrap.
The first one because he debuted that scheme in 2000 for World Finals 2007, I believe. That original body was all hand painted. I think it did eventually move to wrap, of course, but
they eventually all move into wrap after they destroy the painted body. But yeah, I did not know that. I always thought that was just a wrap straight out of the box. We get another pre-taped interview here. Speaking of David, where he talks about how they went from a 540 cubic inch engine to a 565 cubic inch engine. 15 extra cubic inches says he basically had to relearn how to drive the truck.
That's kind of an interesting take. I don't know if I would agree with it, but again, I'm not a racer, so interesting take.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to feel different on the throttle when you've got a little bit more power underneath of you. Digger, though, looks as it should, as intimidating as always. Dennis, fastest time of the night in round one. Dennis, this is where we get this interview from Dennis talking about the track change, and he says it very, very descriptive here. It's sunny, it's dry, and it's windy. So we know if we get water on the track, it's going to take a lot of water because it's going to dry the track out real quick. You'll take off with the track being tacky-ish, and then it'll go away. It'll get so dry and hard that you're going to skid through the corners, just slide or spin out. And they cut away really quick after his interview, but very valid point from the legendary Dennis Anderson right here. Tells you exactly what this track's doing.
I feel like Dennis in that moment, like, went out to the track. He, like, picked up some of the dirt. He was, like, sniffing it. He tasted it a little bit. Like, he took it, put it in a jar, brought it
And
to
then
the
he
lab.
ran up into the stands afterwards and did the interview.
Yeah, stuck a finger in his ear. Yeah, he's a real weatherman.
Yeah, exactly. Puts me in the mind of watching Gary Porter back in the day when he would be out before a round of racing and just kind of walk the track and look at it and kind of see what's going on. Dennis was one of those guys too. And right here, though, everything Dennis just said comes back to bite him in the butt in this race. Because he goes out, yes, he's first across the finish line, but Dennis washes out. He kind of apexes a little too soon, tries to correct with the rear steer, but he knocks down one of those dreaded turning poles, which are 5-second penalties. And David Smith gets a reprieve. He'll come back here, but Dennis, a hard break for the most legendary name in this field.
Yeah, and it's a shame, too, knowing that very strong truck. So such a handicap from the get-go, and definitely had the right mindset, too. And it's just another one unable to get it together, and a little more consistency in the other lane can kind of get you there.
And Dennis had this race won. I mean, he was well ahead of David Smith at this point. I'm not sure. I think David has the same kind of issue in the left lane that a lot of guys were having in the right lane. He slid coming down Thunder Alley, which gave Dennis a big advantage. But I don't know that Dennis could really see how much of an advantage that he had going into that corner, and I think that's where he kind of pressured himself a little bit. King Crunch and Gravedigger at the World Finals, if I remember correctly, I think there's more of a winning record on the Crunch side than there is on the Digger side, because I remember Scott Stevens beat him here at World Finals 1, and now David's doing the same thing here at 9. I don't know. I have to go back and look through the brackets to make sure they never raced each other again.
No, it's very sneaky, and that's just, again, that's the kind of driver David Smith was. And this pass, he was all over the place too, but again, he was just able to capitalize on Dennis not getting it done.
Yeah. Avenger and Captain's Curse here. Interesting pairing right here. Like I said, bright green and bright red. Christmas themed race, maybe?
Ho, ho, ho.
Though more, it could be Marvel versus Pirates of the Caribbean.
I don't watch either, so I'm sorry.
Oh, come on, Phil. Get Disney Plus.
I have no money. Okay.
Blackwell talks about the gear choices in yet another pre-taped interview. Curse leads down the straightaway, but not by much. Exiting the corner, we see he and Kohler are neck and neck, but Jim kind of has to get out of the throttle a little bit quick. The rear end starts to wash out slightly, and that gives the edge to Curse coming across the finish line. Kohler is not a slouch in that race at all.
I got to think that maybe Jim saw where he was at on the track, and he saw that, like, Captain's Curse is right there, and he's not crossing the finish line like he was expecting. And maybe it was like, oh, wow, I have a chance. And then that lost the truck from there. So very strange.
Strange, but I mean, you never know with Jim Kohler, to be perfectly honest. When you're at the World Finals, he can get you or he can't. He's one of those guys that is so inconsistently consistent that he can surprise you. Even in this older truck, he still was surprising people at the World Finals.
He got that round 1 win, man. I mean, that's
he got. I mean, to them, that's the Daytona 500 winning in round 1.
That this time, come on.
One thing I did find interesting here is we end round number 2 and we start to go into round 3. We get Advanced Auto Parts representative Sam Hampton. I about said Stan Hansen for some reason. But he's the director of marketing. He tells us that Advanced Auto Parts has a truck in the show. They've never had a sponsored truck in the show before, and they've chosen the mighty El Toro Loco, which is behind them. I wonder how mighty it was after its round 1 loss. But anyway. They decided they would put their branding on a truck, and they couldn't be happier with their selection. This is the first time that we saw Lupe Sosa have the Advanced Auto Parts branding, and I think they really enjoyed having Lupe as their representative right here. And this would pay off later in Lupe's career, as he would be behind the wheel of Grinder in just a couple of years.
Yeah, and this is not a good weekend for Lupe. His freestyle is not very good either later in the night, but very much PR friendly. I think a great example current time is Bryce Caney with Great Eclipse Mohawk Warrior, where Bryce maybe isn't winning every week. He is very strong driver. I think stronger than maybe Lupe was at this time, but having a good face, you're very well spoken and good at a lot of these sponsor functions. It will get you a long ways. Lindsey Wink had the same relationship with Lucas Oil.
Yep, exactly. And you're 100% correct right there. We go into round number 3. Phil, we're finally down to the final 8.
Oh, boy.
The Elite 8 right here. Max D and Monster Mutt. The year previously, Mintz was eliminated by Charlie Pauken at World Final 7. So this year, you can bet your bottom dollar that Mintz is not going to let that one happen again. And he does not. Pauken basically has a horrible turn. He apexes too early and just basically stops. And Mintz goes on 16.25 second pass, 16.16 earlier in the night, I believe. Deadly consistent from Tom Mintz right here. And when he is that consistent, he is very scary.
At this point in the night, I think, at least I'm thinking when I go back and look at it, especially now, nobody's stopping Tom.
No.
There's just no way. We have a lot of great action, but then there's just Tom. And how are you going to beat Tom? So it's not happening. Yeah.
And like we were talking about Digger 20 earlier, about how sometimes we had that old Richard Petty analogy. Okay, who's going to get second? Throughout at least 10 years of Tom Mintz's career, that's what people thought every time he'd pull into a stadium. All right, who's getting second to Tom? Yeah. This truck was extremely well built. The driver knew how to wheel it, be honest. And he was, for a 10-year stretch here in Monster Jam, the most dominant driver in racing.
It's hard to stop Tom. And in some cases, you're not the ones that's stopping him.
Exactly. It's more or less the equipment that stops Tom Mintz. Yeah. And heck, even in freestyle, the equipment never really stopped him, even when it broke sometimes. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and on to the bracket here. We got Bounty Hunter and Safe Auto next. Heavy favorite right here is Cretan. As they leave the line, it's pretty even. The corner, though, tells the story. Safe Auto makes it nice and tight. Bounty goes a little wide. Bounty Hunter carries the momentum, and to borrow a phrase from George Bellhand, zings past Safe Auto to get the win here by a truck length. This kind of tells the two stories of the really tight corner versus the momentum swinging it wide style corner. This is the best pass Cretan has all night in the right lane, and it's a pass I'm sure he wished he had in later on in the bracket. But I mean, when you look back at this, it's really easy to see why swinging a little bit wide, like Tom Mintz was, is exactly what you needed to do.
Yeah, and Jimmy was able to read that. You know, he's a very smart mind here. And again, against someone like Mark Mcdonald, one of the most consistent racers of all time, Jimmy knew he had to turn it up a level here. Just correctly read that this race wasn't going to be a slouch, and he was able to get the win.
Yep. Air Force Afterburner and Batman. Seasock's run for 2 it's still alive, but it's facing a really big threat right here with Damon Bradshaw. Let's see. Round 1, he had Taz. Round 2, he's got Damon Bradshaw. So basically, Seasock's taking on future number 1 and future number 2 drivers here that are going to be dominant later in their careers. The track has been going away, though, throughout the bracket. It's probably at its worst at this point. Through Thunder Alley, we see Bradshaw in one of the most amazing corrections I think I've ever seen at a Vegas track. He gets a little sideways in Thunder Alley and then somehow gets that truck straight for the straightaway. But then even down Thunder Alley, he almost loses it again going into the corner. It kind of the rear end kind of slips, I believe, to the left just a little bit before he goes into that corner.
Yeah, and you see, especially in so much later years, how many competitors hit trees or they'll finish a race going in reverse or something ridiculous out Thunder Alley, where Damon was able just to keep it all on the line here and just keep it going and stay competitive. He wasn't out.
Yeah, and Douglas calls the lead to Batman right here down the straightaway. He's correct. John does have a lead, but man, if Damon doesn't have those mistakes, Damon's out on him by at least a truck length. Absolutely. You would think. I mean, Damon, like I said, all over the place, just like Adam in the previous round. He has to what really kills his race is when he comes out of the corner, he has to completely stop to avoid a penalty. And that's when Seasock just zooms past him and takes the win. But man, masterful piece of driving by Bradshaw in that first part of the track.
Yeah, and that I think that earned a lot of respect, I would imagine, for a lot of people. keeping it out of the wall or for wadding that truck up. Unfortunately, one mistake too many when he gets to the corner, but I think, unfortunately not the result Damon wants, but I think in a long run perspective, it's a win in a lot of people's minds and hearts, and from the competitor standpoint. And
oh yeah, just
Damon
there's a
should be
sheer
proud of that.
appreciation for how far gone that truck was for him to bring it back not once but twice.
Yeah.
That is something to behold right there. And Seesock, don't get me wrong, no slouch, has a good run in the other lane, but what's happening in the other lane is what people are talking about.
And again, the way he got into this round, capitalizing on other people's mistakes, where now John Seesock's in the semifinals, where maybe he shouldn't have won his first.
He should have lost in round one. He probably should have lost here had Damon not had those issues. Next round, or next race, Captain's Curse and King Crunch. Blackwell shown throughout the bracket exactly where he belongs and why he was given this. That he is exactly where he belongs and why he was given this seat in the first place. Number 2 qualifier, now trying to make it to the semifinal round. Only one legendary name standing in front of him right here, though. Though the driver's not as familiar, David Smith still a credible threat against Captain's Curse right here.
Yeah, and very interesting how Alex progresses to the bracket. I think it sits a lot of point where it's like, oh yeah, Captain's Curse is here, and he found a good hole in the bracket where a lot of the heavy hitters are maybe stacked in other areas, but a good benefit for Alex knowing this is kind of the competitors on my side. I'm able to pick up some wins maybe where people aren't expecting me to.
Exactly. Blackwell has the right lane here and handles it much better than Damon did the previous round. Smith on the other side apexes the corner a little too early, hammers one of the turning poles, and Smith is first across the finish line, but because he hit that pole, dreaded 5-second penalty, the pole giveth and the pole taketh away for David Smith.
Yes, and it's another win for Alex Blackwell, exactly what I was just saying. And now, just like that, he's sitting in the semifinals. Again, a relative, where did he come from? Even though it's one of the defending champions from the previous year, I don't think people were expecting Alex Blackwell to be sitting in the semifinals.
Yeah, nobody expected Blackwell to be sitting there. To compare to another motorsport, one name that is familiar is one of those guys. Where did he come from? Kevin Harvick.
Yeah.
You can throw that out there. Nobody knew who Kevin Harvick was when he took over for Dale Earnhardt in 2001. A lot of eyes on him right here, and he is performing very well under pressure.
You got that right, and it's just a very, very much a story, again, that does not a lot of people really look at. Big deal.
Oh, yeah. Your final 4 is set. Max D, the number 1 qualifier, Bounty Hunter, Captain's Curse, number 2 qualifier, and Batman, the number 3 qualifier. We have a 7-time champion, a man who has finished runner-up multiple times, a World Finals rookie that is on fire, and the previous season's champion, all getting ready to face off here. One thing we get before the final round, though, that I found to be a little bit funny was they bring in the Monsters on Main Street contest, and they show the winner of the Monsters on Main Street contest. But I really wanted to hear the audio from this because you had Mike Wine in the the passenger seat of this vehicle as the lady starting it up. And you can see he's just going at it. He's on this microphone. He's doing this. He's all happy. And then all we get to hear out of is, we got a winner. I want to hear what the hell else he said. He's just going nuts in that.
That's typical Mike Wine. That's the man we know and love. And it's a big weekend for Mike Wine. You know, he gets to debut Backwards Bob later in the night. It's well, what a wild scene. And I think it's a good pairing for Ford Trucks to have Mike Wine out there, part of this winning announcement.
Oh, yeah. And, man, he's so pumped up in this. I really wanted to hear audio of this. Anytime Mike Wine has a microphone, by God, I don't care who's talking. You just shut them up and let Mike Wine finish.
Yeah, you ain't got that. You can say that twice.
Got our first semifinal pairing here. A final anywhere across the country. Jimmy Cretin put his name on the map, defeating Tom Mintz on television, and then by almost defeating him at World Finals 3 in his first of many runner-up finishes.
It's all full circle. This world is cruel.
Yeah. They are at it again here in Vegas in a rematch of that World Finals 3 championship round. Mintz has that right lane that he's had all night, but I still feel that lane's kind of going away a little bit. Even for Tom, I was a little worried as far as how he would handle this lane. Cretin has the left side of the track. Mintz again goes wide here, and Cretin tries that technique I mentioned earlier where he slabs the brake a little bit to try to get that rear to pivot, and it does not work for him right here. He
Yeah.
hits the wrong apex, and Tom just sails past him.
Yeah, now's not the time to be experimenting on the track, Jimmy. This is the semifinals. Now, granted, you are racing the unstoppable Tom Mintz. So I guess you can say he had to try something different, maybe knowing that what he was currently doing wasn't going to be the best to beat the best.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was the appropriate time to do this. I think maybe he would have been better off with a more clean cut pass and just hoping maybe those extra tenths that just doing it the way you're supposed to would have been enough to get him across the line.
Yeah, and right here, it just doesn't work out for Jimmy. Next semifinal, though, we've got Batman and Captain's Curse. Blackwell also in the right lane, even though I feel it's going away. Mintz made it work for the number 1 qualifier, get himself into the finals. Now number 2's lined up over there. And then what we would have to be ended up being the last photo finish of the night, we get Batman and Captain's Curse coming across the line virtually together. Again, though, much like that Iron Outlaw Bounty Hunter matchup we had earlier, Seasock nose straight flying across the finish line. Blackwell wheels up, and that's what gives Seasock a berth into the final round for the 2nd straight year.
Couple Pennsylvania boys getting it done. It's at this point where it really sit like, oh, what? Seasock's here again, and now it's starting to be like he can find a way. He's here again. He can find a way.
You know who he reminds me of?
Who's that?
Like, seriously, in his career, you never thought he would get too many wins, but Ricky Rudd.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, great comparison.
That's John Seasock in this bracket. You don't expect him at all to be anywhere sniffing the finals, even close to the finals against some of these guys. Even though he is the defending champion, he is still a hardcore runner-up, or excuse me, a hardcore underdog.
Yeah, it's not domination ever for Seasock, and that's what surprises a lot of people.
One thing that's extremely surprising, though, here is right before they go to commercial, we hear Scott, uh-oh. When we go back to the pits, Max D's not firing. And, man, this is Tom's night to really, it's Tom's race to lose. Let's be fair. The man has cut the most consistent passes of the entire night. Even though he did just run his slowest pass, it's still mid-16s, 16.44, and his previous pass is a 16.16 and I think 16.25. I mean, he's right there. He's got that lane dialed in perfectly to his favor, even though it's not really working for anybody else. Unfortunate turn of events here, though, as Bounty Hunter's going to come back into the final round, and Tom's not going to get that chance to win the World Finals. All because the truck doesn't fire.
Exactly what we were saying. Tom's not going to lose. And nobody beat Tom Mintz this night. So, record book sits. He's undefeated.
Let's do a little bit of a what-if scenario here. Max D wins, doesn't break down, actually starts and goes to the final. Captain's Curse defeats Batman. We get the matchup that we would eventually get a year later in World Finals 10, 1 year sooner. On this night, if you throw Blackwell into that other lane, into the left lane, and you've got Tom in the right lane, do you still think Tom walks away the winner?
You know, I think I do. I think that the dominance of Tom is a lot stronger against a competitor like Blackwell versus when you have a John Seasock who is the consistency, he'll find a way. I just don't think Alex Blackwell had that driving mindset, especially at this time as a Vegas rookie. I still think Tom wins, but granted, knowing the issues, what's not to say that could have happened to him coming down Thunder Alley. And
yeah, he could have died coming down Thunder Alley, and Blackwell is your world champion in his first appearance, which would have been a mind blower. We didn't really get a straight up race from him the next year either, which is kind of unfortunate. I mean, Blackwell the year after this is kind of like having the same kind of night that Mintz is in World Finals 10. He's one of those guys that you're looking at is like, man, he's on fire. He's on fire. Then he gets to the final round, and unfortunately the brakes fail, and he ends up hitting the stands at the end of the track. I mean, a tough break for Alex, a guy that probably should have won a world championship in his career. Nothing else really to say. I mean, it's one of those things. It's just kind of a what if scenario I wanted to bring up. We get to the final round though. We get Jimmy Cretin He gets the call to come back here as Max D doesn't start. And one thing I liked here from Scott Douglas is he goes, "They're out of time. Here comes Bounty Hunter." He just says it casually, but it's said the way that you're like, "Oh, okay." It almost feels like he's calling it live, even though it's a pre-taped event that's airing later. It still feels like a live call. That's why I like Scott Douglas.
Yeah, it's kind of quirky. I mean, granted, probably in the real event and looking back on it, it was pretty much could have been the time of a commercial break they had to run this because again, it was not like any of the newer listeners where they can just go home and come back the next day for the event. It was a quick intermission, and we had 24 trucks to freestyle. So
yeah, exactly.
You did not have a little like an extra minute for Tom. They really had a quick, imagine like a 60-second clock. It was not very long.
Yeah, it wasn't long at all to try to get him to fire out there. I kind of changed my opinion on that after I had typed these notes because I almost wanted to call Scott Douglas out for saying, well, he's only got really the commercial break here to try and fix this truck. And then I kind of remembered, no, if World Finals, they probably don't have much time at all to really give him.
Yeah, that could be generous, given a little more than needed.
And I imagine in this particular situation, they were being pretty generous for Tom to try to get him out there on the track. But unfortunately, like I said, record books are going to show he was undefeated on the night, but he didn't get to the final.
Absolutely.
World Finals 3, 4, and 7 are all runner-up appearances for Jimmy Cretin. All different instances that kind of happened to him right here. No one has ever wanted a championship more at the World Finals than Jimmy Cretin, and now he's got his fourth shot at it. Fourth shot at a championship in 9 years of competition, and he's only been racing since World Finals 3. So that's an incredible stat for somebody. The problem is he's not gotten that over that hump yet, and it's going to take him quite a while to get over that hump, as we find out later in Jimmy Cretin's career. Right here, though, it's a good race, but one thing that I noticed going into the corner, and I don't know if you noticed the same thing, is when Cretin goes to get back on the power, left rear tire does not spin.
I don't know if I knew that.
Yeah, if you watch when he's coming into that corner, or he's coming out of that corner, excuse me, he gets on the throttle, that right rear is going, that left rear, it takes a long time for it to come in, and it looks like that's why he kind of spins out a little bit and catches the turn pole, and that's when Seesock just drives on past him and take yet another world championship. The only guy other than Tom Mintz in the history of the Monster Jam World Finals to win them back-to-back.
Incredible where there's two statements made there. For one, Jimmy Cretin finds yet another way to lose the World Finals.
Yeah.
And somehow, some way, John Seesock wins again. And then I think this one is not as decisive. It's kind of interesting. It's not as decisive of a bracket, maybe compared to the previous year. But if anything, the win more so solidifies John Seesock.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this whole bracket to me, and I kind of compared it in my head to the tortoise and the hare story.
Yeah.
Because Seesock is not at all the fastest thing out there on the track. He's the only guy with, this is the kind of funny thing to this analogy, he's the only guy with afterburners on the back of his truck. But he doesn't use them throughout this bracket. I'm making a fun joke about the afterburners on the back of Batman for those people that don't know. But anyway, I mean, the truck, he's consistent, but he's on the slow side of the consistency, whereas Tom was on the fast side of the consistency. And had we got those two in the finals, I think you were going to see a runaway from Mintz. I think Tom would have come out of the corner and he would have beaten Seesock by about 3 truck lengths.
Yeah, it would have been. I think it would have been ugly, to be fair. Although I think John would have found a nice, consistent pass, but compared to maybe some other people that Tom beat throughout the night, it wouldn't have been as crisp.
Yeah, exactly. I think Tom would have just sailed on to victory here. He would have gone back in the next year, and he would have been another double world champion in racing. He would have won a couple of them in a row. Instead, we get John Seesock winning 2 in a row here, and just an interesting way for somebody to come through the bracket, Phil. He gets a gimme in his race against Adam. He gets a gimme in his race against Damon. He gets a really good race with Captain's Curse. It's really the hardest race that he drove the entire night. And then here in the finals, he gets, I believe, I don't know if Cretin broke an axle, but when I watched that race, it sure looked like something went wrong in the rear end of that truck.
Yeah, which is never fun to see. again, just the ways that Jimmy finds a way to lose. And then Seesaw, I mean, I kind of look at the history of racing brackets. At World Finals, I think there was like a Young Gun bracket. It might have been Scott Liddycoats winning Dragon. Very similar bracket. But I know one personally I saw was when Alan Pizzo won the Stadium Racing in Phoenix in 2012. He won that bracket after losing in round one, after everybody else making mistakes. Making a count where it matters most. And John Seesaw doing the same thing, but this time as a back-to-back world champion.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, only other guy in Monster Jam World Finals history to do it was Tom Mintz. It's a stat that John Seesaw can share with one of the greatest of all time. And I didn't like his interview, though. I have to point that out. I didn't like Seesaw's interview. He seemed like he was so calm. Like he took a Xanax before he walked up on stage. He's just so calm in this interview, and he's just so soft-spoken. He couldn't really celebrate. He had to drive the truck to the back because, like I said, the transmission was getting hotter and hotter, and he still had another world championship to try to go for later in the evening, which was freestyle. But he says, I tried to stay calm the best I could throughout the whole night, just like last year. JR and Cody, my crew guys, deserve all the credit. Every round we went, the truck got hotter and hotter. Transmission got hotter and hotter. I was having a hard time between rounds. These guys were back there thrashing on that thing. And after we won the final round, I had to just take it to the back right away because I didn't think it would make it back there. Thanks to the fans for supporting us. Thanks to Live Nation, the other sponsors, Advance Auto, the Batman team. Thank you guys very much. Just a very subdued interview from somebody that just won one of the wildest brackets in Monster Jam history.
It's almost as if, we look at that interview from the previous year, which is iconic, extremely emotional, and it's almost as if like that took the emotion. Now it's, again, a solidifying win, and John's already thinking about what's next, knowing that he has to go out and freestyle, and this truck is not at 100%. It says, yeah, I win, but I want to keep going, and that's my biggest concern. I can go celebrate when the weekend's over. I need to make sure this truck is ready for freestyle because I think I have a shot to win that too.
Yeah. This show, like I said, Phil, remembered very well with the fans. Probably more for the freestyle bracket, but for me, it's always been the racing that was just so memorable at this show. Like I said, the first 8 races had 5 photo finishes. I don't think that I've seen any other brackets like that, and I don't think we saw them at all that season.
No way.
I haven't seen them. I haven't seen many other World Finals like that as well. There are a few other World Finals where there are some amazingly close races, but this one had them right out of the box. Bang, bang, bang. Photo finish, photo finish, photo finish. Right down to that last one we got with Batman and Captain's Curse. It was just one of those brackets as a race fan that you're almost salivating at to watch.
And again, it's because a lot of those early matchups, they were paired correctly, and it built up very well to when we progressed in the bracket. I do agree with you, when you look at the freestyle, which is just a love letter to any Monster Jam fan. It's the reason why the All-Star Challenge track looked the way it is because of that freestyle. It is overlooked looking at this racing bracket, and it will be a number of years until we get a lot of close finishes like this, like we were rattling them off right off the bat. And that is very much a testament to the level playing field. Again, the right competitors match up with each other, and we can talk, slouches like we kind of were hinting at from earlier discussions. It's a strong field. This is really
a very strong field.
I can't really think of anybody that's missing from this lineup except sans Pablo Huffaker that should have been in this lineup that was not here. This was, I think, exactly the right competitors, and this racing bracket 100% proves that.
Yeah, I agree too. The one really big downer for me was just most of the broadcast.
Yeah.
The racing itself brings this above a 6 for me as far as the rating goes. The broadcast and just some of the things that they did during it, where they did all these pre-taped interviews, they don't have the live reactions from the guys. I mean, there are a couple of people that have called me out on this, like, well, you disagree with this, but what would you have done differently? What would you have done differently? It's an easy choice here. Have a pit reporter in the pits to talk to these guys after the rounds. I don't care if they get out of the trucks or not. Fold a microphone up there while they got the helmet on. Ask them what they thought of that pass. The biggest thing that I think that they missed out on was not having an interview with Wink and Cretin before that pass, because that is the most energy-charged race that entire night, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think that would have easily been accomplished. even just cutting out one of the pre-tape interviews, that would have just been enough time to get a little bit more on why this race is important, especially if you're an outsider flipping through the speed channel and you're catching the world championship for monster trucks and you don't understand why this really is an important race. Having a reporter in the pits would just add an extra emotion, and just especially when we had all these photo finishes, a little more power. I really am curious, that decision, why have that? And it's a shame because, again, those pre-tapes, it seemed like they sat down all the competitors, they asked them the same
same questions.
It was almost obligated. It's like, well, shoot, we filmed everybody. Like, they probably filmed one for Mike Vaughters. We never saw it. So it's like, but we have all this footage. We need to find a way to use it. And that's why it seems like it's almost shoehorned and forced, and it really doesn't fit with the emotion that's going on as the bracket progresses.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate here. Not even Seasock's interview was really showing any kind of emotion. It's the only one that we really get as far as like backstage sort of thing. And he's just like, yeah, cool, I won kind of thing. I mean, he almost kind of, it's like one of the Cena things where he brushes it off his shoulder or something. I mean, your second world championship, he doesn't really show all that much emotion. It's kind of disappointing to me, especially from the year before, which was one of those iconic moments when you see a tear-filled John Seasock standing on top of his truck, pointing his finger in the air to what we got this time around. I mean, like I said, one of the greatest racing brackets ever that they just kind of, it almost like they brush under the rug with the quality of the broadcast. I gave it a 7 out of 10 as far as my rating goes. And only because, and the way that I do the ratings is I'll go what I feel the racing was and what I feel the broadcast was. I basically gave the broadcast a 2.
Yeah, and I would imagine the same way looking at it. Broadcast for me would probably no more than 5, so 5 out of 10. The racing itself, maybe an 8 out of 10. Maybe only because of bias, knowing that I think there are stronger World Finals brackets to come, but in the freeze frame at this time, it is extremely strong. But again, it's also lost because the freestyle competition was nuclear. Because sometimes you have those World Finals where it's very decisive that the racing bracket is so much better than what goes on in freestyle. And because both of them are very strong, a lot of people pick that freestyle head, and that does distort how awesome that racing is. And again, that's maybe that mindset with John Seasock. It's like, yeah, I won racing. But did you see that triple bus stack out there I have to hit? Like,
yeah, exactly.
That was really the bigger story for the entire weekend.
Yeah, I agree. To just touch on the freestyle just a little bit, this is not a freestyle podcast, but probably one of the best runs I think we've ever seen in the World Finals that holds up to this day is Adam's freestyle that eventually is the World Championship freestyle. One of the few that people actually agree on as the truck that should have won the World Championship that year as far as freestyle goes. You were there live. What did that sound like?
Oh, my. I'll tell you, back in just that whole night is that triple bus stack. Who is going to attack it? First truck out, Chad Tingler and Monster Truck Dalmatian. He clears it. That's the yearbook.
Not only clears it, but lands it on the down ramp.
I'm pretty sure that's the DVD picture. So that hype is like, where do we go from here? And every competitor found a way to do something ridiculous. And then when Adam came out, I mean, Dawn Green had that crazy wreck off of the triple that she almost wins. So, but then Adam gets the win. The crowd was very ecstatic. I remember, because it was really like the future is now moment, because he is the son of Dennis Anderson. Remember, Ryan is not in the picture at all yet. Mm-hmm. So, like, this is the Adam Anderson coming out party and really the start of the next era of Andersons. And that is very much an iconic moment. And I know as years go on, he wins a lot more championships. He's the dominant fashion in the legend. But this Taz run, massive deal. And I like to think that this night in general is really it's a turning point, a tipping point in the evolution of the sport. I know, again, this is a lot of racing, but I know we bring in the backflip becomes common practice by this time the next year. Really, well, I don't say common practice, but starts to get introduced with guys like Mintz and Larry Quick, and the level of the freestyle competition, even some of the track changes. World Finals stay static, but the tracks, the jumps get a lot bigger and a lot more carnage. And I think this is the apex where it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and it worked perfect again with a great lineup of drivers here.
Yep, I agree. Hey, before we get out of here, Phil, what podcasts do you do? Because I know there are so many out there. You got the Monster Truck Collecting Podcast, Monster Truck Outlaws of the West. Go ahead, plug yourself, plug your stuff, and just give us an overall of what Paul V does.
Yeah, Paul. People call me Bill now too. So, but no, I at this time I currently host two podcasts. One of which the Monster Truck Collecting Podcast. Myself, Monster Jam OCD, and RJ Darrow. We talk about toys. We really do a timeline of the toys. We start with the Hot Wheels toys and building on from there. That's on Monster Jam OCD's YouTube channel, so we do that every Monday night. It sits in the archives. Monster Truck Outlaws of the West was started by Vincent Ackard, and I get to host it with him, and we interview a lot of the past, present, and future of the monster trucks on the West Coast scene. We do a lot of eras from rising stars to Hall of Famers.
Yeah, and I've listened to a couple of the Hall of Famer shows that you've done. The Seth Dalton interview is probably one of my favorites. Definitely go check that one out, guys. But anyway, I'll let you keep talking.
It's a great one. I'm glad you mentioned it because there's a little bit of something for everyone and a lot of different stories, a lot of sleeper episodes too, where maybe someone that's watching old school, they get enjoyment out of another episode. And I know by the time this comes out, spoiler alert, we have coming up next, Nathan Wink is our next guest. So by the time this gets put out, Nathan's episode will probably be in the archives. So wherever you can download podcasts, I'm sure we're going to listen to this review. You can search us up down there for both those podcasts. We also go live Facebook every Friday nights if you want to tune in live and get some questions answered. That's always a big thing too. You mentioned I run the Monster Truck Collecting Facebook group. It is the most active monster truck group on Facebook. It's not just for toys. That's the main purpose. But we talk about the real stuff too. We break a lot of news. It's really like the news source. A lot of people call me like the Adam Schefter of monster trucks. That's how I'm not trying to break news, but that ends up what happening is if you want to, stay up to date on what's going on, active Facebook community. That's us, Monster Truck Collecting. Make sure you're in the group and always around social media. So if you want to send me a friend request or follow me on Instagram, find me. I'm always on my messenger if you have a question too.
Yep, and that's how I found Phil to get him on this podcast.
Hi.
It's great having you here, buddy. I really thank you for hopping on here for this one. This is one that I wanted to talk about for a while. I knew you had been to this event, so I wanted to get an insight from somebody that was there to go along with my insight as somebody that watched it later on television or stayed up maybe way too late one night and tried to get results from in early YouTube days. Tried to see a few races.
How old am I now to know that this is retro?
Yeah, I know, right?
I need a back brace.
We should have had World Finals 21 last year. That's I mean, the main reason I wanted to do World Finals 9 was because I always love this racing bracket, but it's hard to believe that this is now considered old school to a lot of younger fans. And this might have been some people's first introduction to monster trucks.
Yeah, again, and it's a good reason to have it introduced. It's a great apex in the sport and just a weekend that still just holds the test of time.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of those in monster truck history. This one might be in the one, was it top 5?
Oh, again, for me personally, my favorite, just from the previous, 12 or 13 I've been to, I think everybody else would agree. I don't know anybody that does not have this in their top 5 at the bottom least. I don't know anybody. Listen to
him, by the way, folks. Just casually bring up, I've been to at least 12 of these. Thanks. I've only been to one. Or actually, I take that back. I've been to none.
I'm very blessed for the opportunities I've had to go to events and the opportunities I've had in the industry. So it's a labor of love, and I do appreciate it.
Yep, I'm very blessed as well. I only got the one tour last year, but I'm itching for more. So hopefully all this stuff clears up soon so we can all get back to work and share a beer together or something. But anyway, though, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Retro Monster Truck Review. We will see you guys again on the tracks across America. A couple of news and notes here late in the Retro Monster Truck Review from a friend of mine who also happens to be the man that was crew chiefing John Seesock that particular weekend in World Finals number 9. That is Mr. Cody Saucier. Cody, actually I shot him a message before I recorded this episode with Phil, and took him a little while to get back to me. He was at work, but he did message me back later today. This is actually Thursday now that I'm adding on to this. Cody, I remember I asked him if there's just anything that he could tell me about World Finals 9, and the first thing that he told me is that show, I remember it was hot, warmer than normal it would be for that event. Back then, everybody was using a single trans cooler, so keeping the trans cool was very important. I would take cold rags from an ice cooler and put them over the transmission between rounds. It looks like they were using wildwood rotors and calipers, so keeping a fan between rounds on the brakes were important as well. Those were my tricks that helped keep us surviving that night. So that explains why Seesock probably took off right after the final round and went to the back. The transmission was indeed very hot. Another little tidbit from Cody right here was the fact that they were running 6 inches of travel front and rear, and Cody would strap it in a way so that it would not transition on the top end. It wouldn't hurt the truck too bad, basically, at the end of the track, which that's a trick that drag racers use to this day. Cody also told me that he would run a lighter motor oil inside the planetaries instead of a thick 90 or 80 weight gear oil. I brought up the fact to Cody that John's times were a high 16 or a very low 17-second pass, whereas Tom was running mid-16s to very low 16s. I asked him if he thought Tom's truck had a distinct advantage out there on the track, to which he replied absolutely. There was a slightly different ratio inside of the ZF axles that Tom was running, and how light his truck was back then, which I believe it was about 9,500 pounds. The last thing that I asked Cody was basically, hey, 2 years in a row you guys won the racing championship. The first year was obviously a great highlight with as emotional as John Seesock was. The second year, what did that one really mean to you guys? And he said they didn't even have a clue they won it until they were told to go do some interviews. They were focused on going rounds. It was pretty rad, though. I would put in a ton of work on the truck just to make sure it was 110%. I didn't want anything to fail. John did the driving, and it worked. The second World Championship also said that, hey, the first one wasn't a fluke. I was the new guy around there on the crew, and they didn't think that I had any tricks. And Cody certainly did prove everybody wrong that weekend. He did have some tricks up his sleeve, and him and Bill Easterly Jr., crew chief John Seesock, to his second straight World Racing Championship. With that said, though, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and hop out of here, and I will again see you very soon on the tracks across America.